Chapter 1063. System, I've estimated that I'll be able to bring it back to life in at most 10 more worlds. Gu Shengyin tilted his head and looked at the frail little kingfisher in his palm. There was a hint of a smile in his voice. Whether it was the curled corners of her lips or the smile in her eyes, it was easy to see that she was very happy at this moment. Of course she was happy. She remembered that the system said that there were two conditions. First, she had to create a complete life. Second, she had to walk out of here with her own strength. She didn't know how long it would take to create a life and walk out of here. But one by one day, she would be able to walk out of here with her own strength, right? She felt that she was full of fighting spirit and energy. Let's go to the next world. System. Yes, host. When he opened his eyes, Gu Shengyin felt pain coming from his elbows, knees, and other parts of his body. Was he injured? She looked around and found that she was in a very simple room. Other than the bed, there were only a few stools and a wooden table with a teapot on it. No matter how she looked at it, the owner of this room lived a very poor life. However, even though the room was simple, it wasn't sloppy. It wasn't something that was unbearable. Gu Shengyin started to accept the memory transfer of this world. The owner of this body was called Chu Failwan, the princess of Tianzi country. But this princess didn't like to dress up and preferred to be armed. She wasn't interested in the luxurious life in the palace, but she liked to play with swords and spears. She was the only daughter of the emperor of Tianzi country. The emperor doted on her to the bone and naturally didn't want her to be unhappy. The usually wise and mighty emperor was unexpectedly willful for once. He hired the best martial arts teacher for his daughter and personally sent her to the battlefield when she was 18 years old. This was something that many people, including Chu Failwan's mother, couldn't understand. The emperor said, "My daughter is an eagle that belongs to the sky. How can I disregard her wishes and lock her in a golden cage just because I am afraid that she will get hurt?" It was proven that Chu Failwan was born to be on the battlefield. She had a good grasp of the battle situation and could often use strange moves to catch the enemy off guard. She had used a year's time and her military exploits to silence those people in the imperial court. She was Tianzi's goddess of war, and the emperor loved her like a treasure. He even said in front of the entire court, "This daughter of mine is a treasure bestowed to Tianzi by the heavens. If she is willing, I am willing to pass on the throne to her and let her become Tianzi's honorable empress." He said if Chu Failwan was willing. Everyone knew that Chu Failwan didn't want to get involved in the imperial court. She only liked to fight. She enjoyed the sense of accomplishment when she arranged her troops and led them to beat the enemy until they fled. Chu Failwan was 83 years old. She had led the soldiers of Tianzi Kingdom through hundreds of battles. There were injuries, there were life and death situations, but there had never been a single defeat. This was a legend in itself. She was also the only woman in the history of Tianzi country who was crowned as empress while she was a princess. The empress of Qinghuan had lived through 3 dynasties, and all the emperors of the 3 dynasties regarded her as the indispensable pillar of the country. She was a woman who lived a more exciting life than men. Chapter 1064. Just by looking at the plot, Gu Shengyin felt a sense of yearning for this legendary woman. Such a woman was worthy of respect no matter what era she was in. However, a small accident completely disrupted Chu Failwan's life. In a war between Tianzi country and Yunzi country, Chu Failwan, as the commander of Tianzi country, was ambushed by the enemy and accidentally fell off a cliff. Chu Failwan was the main character and was blessed by the heavenly Tao, so falling off a cliff would not kill her. She fell at a place called Muda village at the foot of the mountain and was saved by a hunter. However, her head was hit and there was a blood clot in her brain, so she lost her memory temporarily. It was not a big deal. The villagers in the mountain were very simple and friendly to her, an outsider. She was supposed to recuperate in the mountain village for 2 months, then she would recover her memory in the 3rd month, say goodbye to them, and leave this place. And this experience would become an inconspicuous memory in her life. However, a person who was not supposed to be here appeared and turned this place into Chu Failwan's burial place. A girl from the modern world entered the body of a girl named Xiao. Gu Xingyi knew that this world was like a TV series to that outsider. Chu Failwan was the female lead of that TV series. That outsider died because the circuit in her house caught fire. Before she died, she was watching the TV series with Chu Failwan as the main character. That outsider did not know how she came to this world. The point was that when she came here and saw Chu Failwan, who was seriously injured and unconscious, she finally understood where she was. The outsider did not feel sad. On the contrary, she was very happy. She knew the whole story of this world and felt that she was blessed by the heavens to be able to come to this world. Could it be that she was the female lead in a time travel novel? In the beginning, she had planned to rely on Chu Failwan. After all, Chu Failwan was a princess, so the outsider wanted to rely on Chu Failwan to leave this place. However, although Chu Failwan had lost her memory, she was very sensitive to people's thoughts. She didn't know what this outsider was thinking, but she could keenly sense that he didn't have any good intentions towards her. The outsider wanted to please Chu Failwan but failed, so he started to feel resentful. In addition, Chu Failwan was seriously injured and looked weak and pale. She actually had a vicious thought in her mind. That outsider was a surgeon in the modern world. Through some kind of luck, he obtained a medical manual left behind by the legendary ghost doctor, which recorded all kinds of strange and cruel methods. One of them was to change his face. Although it was called changing one's face, it was actually changing one's face in the way one wanted through surgery and drugs. It was a long process, and Chu Failwan had only stayed here for 3 months. The goal of the outsiders was to make him Chu Failwan. When Chu Failwan was still recovering from her injuries, she secretly killed her and peeled off her face meticulously. Then, she took Chu Failwan's body away and left the place. Chapter 1065. Chu Failwan was originally an outsider, so when she suddenly disappeared, the people in the village would at most find it strange. It was very dangerous in the forest, so they would not take the risk to look for an outsider. Xiao was a girl, so her status in the family was not as high as her 2 younger brothers. Her parents did not like her, so they went out to look for her, but did not find her, so they left her alone. The outsider who had taken over Xiao's body found a place to hide in the forest for a period of time, and wore Chu Failwan's human skin mask on her face. Then, she was found by the people of Tianzi country who came to look for her. That outsider pretended to lose her memory, and fooled them for a period of time. She turned herself into Chu Failwan. In this way, Chu Failwan was still the legendary princess, but no one knew that the real princess's body had been exposed in the wilderness, and even her soul could not rest in peace. Knock knock knock. Gu Xingyi's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She came back to her senses, and saw a thin figure pushing the door open and walking in. She was just thinking about her, and here she was. Ah! Xiao was startled by the cold gaze of the woman on the bed. Gu Xingyi quickly came back to her senses, and realized that she had been affected by the plot, and could not control her emotions towards this woman. That's right, this woman was the outsider who had taken over Xiao's body. She adjusted her state of mind, and her eyes regained their usual calmness and coldness. "Who are you?" she asked. Xiao was a little confused and excited at the same time. When she had just transmigrated to this world, she had broken down when she saw the environment in her house, and found out that she had come to a remote mountain village. Others transmigrated to princesses, daughters of noble families, and strong women, but why did she transmigrate to a poor peasant girl? But when she found out that she was called Xiao, had 2 younger brothers, and that there was a hunter named Shirley in this mountain village, her mind became active. All these were so similar to the TV series she had just watched. Especially when Xiao's mother said this morning that Big Stone had found a girl covered in blood in the mountains. This was obviously the plot of Qinghuan King. Axiu was pleasantly surprised. She felt that she seemed to have found a way to leave this place. That was the legendary princess. If she remembered correctly, she would be found by Tianzi's people in 2 months and leave this place. If he could win her favor and then show her his unique medical skills, it would definitely arouse her interest. If that was the case, why would he have to worry about not being able to leave this damned place? The more Axia thought about it, the more excited she became. She rushed here excitedly without even having lunch. Who would have thought that at first glance, she would be frightened by the coldness and killing intent in his eyes? As expected of someone who had been on the battlefield, Axia thought. Then, she was attracted by that person's appearance. She had watched the TV series before. The female lead, Chu Feilwan, was the most popular actress at the moment. Of course, she was beautiful. After all, Chu Feilwan, the Queen of Qinghuan, was the most beautiful woman in the 5 continents and 12 countries. She was beautiful enough to topple cities. However, when she saw her in person, she finally understood why she was the #1 beauty in the 5 continents and 12 countries. Chapter 1066. This woman, even if she was wearing the rough cotton clothes of a peasant woman in the mountains, because she was lying in bed, there were no hairpins in her hair, and there was no makeup on her face, she, as a woman, was stunned at first sight. How could there be such a perfect appearance in the world? Even if she was looking at her expressionlessly, she would not feel uncomfortable. Beauties always had unlimited privileges. She smiled. I heard from my mother that Brother Dashi saved a girl, so I came to see her. The Brother Dashi she mentioned was Shirley, the man who saved Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin did not have a good impression of this woman at all, so when he heard her say such words, he immediately retorted, "So, you're done now? Can you leave now? I'm injured now, and the owner of this house is not at home, so I can't entertain you." She chased her away in an obvious way. Xiu's face changed. She did not expect Chu Feilwan to speak so rudely. But she still had her own purpose. She pretended that she did not understand Gu Xingyin's words, but widened her eyes and showed an envious look, saying, "Sister, you're so beautiful. I've never seen a woman more beautiful than you. I'm Xiu, a peasant in this mountain. Sister, what's your name?" Although she already knew in her heart, she still wanted to confirm if this person was really Chu Feilwan. Gu Xingyin was very cooperative. "My head is injured, so I don't remember anything in the past." When Axia heard this, she finally set her mind at ease. Although she was very willing to stay and talk to Gu Xingyin was not very cooperative. Besides, Gu Xingyin's face was pale and bloodless. Xiu knew that if she disturbed her too much, it would make her feel disgusted, so she had to go out unhappily. Not long after she left, the owner of this house came back. At the first sight of Shirley, Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. This man's figure was very strong, and his skin was a healthy bronze color due to years of sun exposure. Now that it was spring, the thin spring shirt could not hide the powerful muscles on his arms. The man had thick eyebrows and big eyes. Although he could not be considered handsome, he had a heroic and masculine aura. He was an unyielding man. Anyone who saw this man for the first time would have such an adjective in their mind. Most importantly, Gu Xingyin sensed a familiar aura from him. However, when this tall and handsome man saw Gu Xingyin, he stuttered, You're awake?" He seemed to be at a loss. When he saw Gu Xingyin looking at him coldly, he became even more flustered. When I went out to hunt last night, I happened to see you fainted in the forest, so I carried you back." After he finished speaking, he noticed that Gu Xingyin was still looking at him without saying anything. He blushed. "Don't worry, I didn't sleep in this house last night. I also asked the neighbor, Aunt Zhang, to change your clothes for you." Okay, I know." Gu Xingyin finally spoke. "Thank you." Even if she was thanking him, she did not show any extra expression on her face. Seeing that Gu Xingyin had finally spoken, Shirley finally heaved a sigh of relief. He did not care about her indifference. It was reasonable for such a girl to be a little wary when she was brought home by a strange man. Chapter 1067. Gu Xingyin wanted to laugh when she saw him like that. But she had to hold it in. Chu Feilwan's character was cold and arrogant. She was always cold and indifferent to people she wasn't close to. She looked down and saw Shirley holding a basket in his hand. Seeing her look, Shirley remembered why he was here. He quickly took the basket in his hand. "You must be hungry after lying down for so long." This is the porridge I made. I put some mountain delicacies and wild bird meat in it. It's delicious. Have a taste. Shirley said excitedly. After a while, he realized that she did not say anything. He smiled awkwardly. Gu Shengyin looked at him and said in a low voice, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Shirley grinned. Gu Shengyin lowered her head and ate the porridge slowly. Her movements were slow and elegant. Shirley's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He never knew that there was someone who could make porridge look so good. He always felt that when this young lady held it like this, his coarse porcelain bowl seemed to have become more precious. She looked so good, and her movements were so... What was the word again? The teacher in the village taught him. Yes, her movements were so elegant. This girl must be from a big family in the big city. Shirley was confused when he remembered how she was lying there covered in blood. He did not know how she fell down the cliff. Coincidentally, the silver armor on Chu Failwan's body fell off when she fell off the cliff. That was why no one in the village thought that she was involved in the war. After Gu Shengyin finished the porridge, Shirley took the bowl and asked her if she wanted more. Gu Shengyin shook her head. Although the porridge smelled good and she was hungry, she had not eaten for a few days. It was better not to eat too much. "May I know my savior's name?" she asked. Shirley was stunned for a moment before he realized that she was asking for his name. He sighed inwardly. This girl was different. Even her words were so elegant. He replied, "My name is Shirley, the lay from the 3 stones. Others call me Big Stone, you can also call me Stone. Don't call me your benefactor. We mountain people don't like that." Gu Shengyin lowered her head and said, "You saved my life. Since you don't want me to call you benefactor, how about I call you Big Brother Shir?" Shirley grinned, revealing his white teeth. "That works too." This lady was so polite. Could it be that her cold appearance was due to her personality? He thought for a moment and asked, "Then, how should I address you, miss?" Gu Shengyin was stunned. Then, Shirley saw the person in front of him frown, as if he was very troubled. Gu Shengyin looked at Shirley and said, "To be honest, Big Brother Shir, I don't remember anything after I woke up here. I don't even know my name." Hearing this, Shirley's heart was filled with pity. What a pitiful girl. Not only did she not know why she fell from such a high mountain, but she had also lost her memory after much difficulty. That was really, he originally wanted to say something, but when the time came, he forgot what it was. Sure enough, she was not well educated. At this moment, Shirley realized his shortcomings. He thought for a moment and said, "You can't remember your name, but you should have a name." Chapter 1068. Suddenly he thought of something and said to Gu Shengyin, "Wait a moment." Then Gu Shengyin saw him get up and bend down, seemingly taking out a small wooden box from under the bed. The wood was still very new, apparently the box had just been made. Shirley opened the box and handed it to Gu Shengyin. Inside was a milky white jade pendant and a white jade hairpin of the same color. "These are your things, I made the decision to keep them for you. There is a word engraved on the jade pendant, see if you can remember anything." Gu Shengyin stretched out her hand and picked up the jade pendant. Shirley looked at it and felt that her pale hand was even whiter than the jade pendant. On the jade pendant, there was a word, "one," engraved neatly. Gu Shengyin knew what this jade pendant represented. Every member of the royal family of Tianzhe country was born with a jade pendant that symbolized their status. The word engraved on the jade pendant was their name. She gently stroked the word with her hand and said softly, "I still can't remember, but there is a word, 'one,' on it. Big Brother Shir, you can call me a 'one' in the future." "A 'one, a 'one." Shirley repeated it twice and said with a smile, "This name sounds good, I'll call you a 'one.'" Gu Shengyin's eyes flashed with a trace of smile. In the following days, Shirley punctually brought food to Gu Shengyin at mealtime every day. He would not stay here for too long, after all, a man and a woman were alone. Shirley was also afraid that it would ruin Gu Shengyin's reputation. But Xiao would come over to take a look when she was free. Even if Gu Xingyin had made it very obvious that she did not like to see her, Xiao always pretended not to see her. This day, when Shirley entered the door, he happened to see Xiao going out. The moment he entered the door, he saw the tired look on Gu Xingyin's face. He also knew that Xiao came to his house every day. What's wrong? Did Xiao disturb your rest? I'll talk to Auntie Zhou later, he said. Gu Xingyin shook her head. Don't. I can get out of bed in the next 2 days. If you have nothing to do, go out and get some sun. It's not that she's disturbing me. It's just that Miss Xiao always likes to ask me some strange questions. Hearing the word strange, Shirley's expression changed. He hesitated for a moment and said to Gu Xingyin, I've heard some rumors about Xiao. Logically speaking, I shouldn't say such things, but since you've encountered it, I'll give you a reminder. Gu Xingyin was very interested in this. Shirley said, I heard from Xiao's mother, Auntie Zhou, that Xiao has been abnormal during this period. She used to be such a diligent girl, but now she doesn't sleep until late in the morning and doesn't get up. Auntie Zhou has to shout at her every day. When she gets up, she doesn't tidy up the house. When she eats, she dislikes this and that. He lowered his voice and said, Auntie Zhou also said that her daughter might be possessed. Gu Xingyin understood in her heart. How could she be possessed? It was obvious that she was a different person. It seemed that Xiao did not hide her nature at all in this mountain village. Perhaps in her heart, she would have to leave this place sooner or later. There was no need to waste energy on it. Chapter 1069. Gu Xingyin's prediction was right, this body's recovery ability was very strong. After a few days, she could get out of bed, but she couldn't do strenuous exercise. But at least she could help Shirley clean up the house. But to be honest, Gu Xingyin wasn't very good at these things. Shirley could clearly clean up the house in 2 or 3 moves, but if she did it herself, she would have to spend half a day. Shirley once saw this and laughed on the spot. Although I don't know what your identity is, but I think you must be a big family's young miss, so you definitely haven't done this kind of rough work before. Shirley laughed. Looking at Gu Xingyin's appearance, it was clear that she was a novice. Speaking of this, Gu Xingyin became angry. When she came to this world to draw skills, even a life skill would have been good, but what did she get in the end? Congratulations to the host for obtaining the weak and delicate, sickly beauty aura. When you show a delicate and pitiful appearance, you will automatically beautify yourself and obtain a beauty bonus effect. Gu Xingyin, she thought for a long time before she finally remembered where this so-called weak and delicate beauty aura came from. But, what was the use of this? She was Tianzai's goddess of war. Who would have thought that the Green Phoenix King would put on a pitiful look with a cold face? At this point, Gu Xingyin no longer had any hope for the skill draw. Back to the main topic. After confirming that she really wasn't good at cleaning up the house, Gu Xingyin turned her gaze to the kitchen. Fortunately, her cooking level was still there. The system gave her the maximum level of her cooking skill. So when Shirley came back from hunting one day and smelled the food coming out of his house, he thought that something had happened at home. Until the calm-faced Gu Xingyin came out with 2 dishes and put them on the table. I've already finished cooking, come and eat. Shirley looked at the dishes with some surprise. Whether it was the smell or the color, they were quite enticing, feeling very novel. Gu Xingyin lightly said, Today I saw that there was food in the kitchen, so I made some. The 2 of them washed their hands and started eating. When Shirley finished his bowl of rice and got up to refill his bowl, he turned around and glanced at Gu Xingyin, who was eating. Then, his face turned red. For some reason, he felt that this scene really looked like a family. Gu Xingyin glanced at the person who could still giggle while eating and did not say anything. Instead, Axiu came over right after the 2 of them finished their lunch. When she saw Gu Xingyin washing the dishes, she looked as if she had seen a ghost. You. How can you wash the dishes? She was the famous Qing Yuan king in the history of the Qing Yuan dynasty, a princess with golden branches and jade leaves, yet she was washing dishes in such a small mountain village. Gu Shengyin looked at her strangely. Miss Xiu's words are strange. Why can't I wash the dishes? Xiu's eyes widened. But you, how can you wash the dishes? Gu Shengyin paused and looked at Xiu indifferently. I am? Does Miss Xiu know who I am? Axia quickly shook her head. How can I know who you are? I just think that such a beautiful woman like you washing the dishes is an insult to her hands. Gu Shengyin lowered her head and looked at her hands. It turned out that washing dishes could be insulted. Shirley had been frowning and looking at this side. Seeing this, he said to Axiu, Miss Xiu, I just heard Aunt Zhou calling you to go home. You should go back quickly, or you will be scolded later. Chapter 1070. Xiu's expression changed. She had been in this world for nearly a month. If she had to name one person she was afraid of, it must be Xiu's mother, Aunt Zhou. There was no other reason. Aunt Zhou's mouth was too powerful. As long as Axiu heard her name, her chubby face would immediately appear in her mind. She would have one hand on her waist and the other pointing at you with her index finger. Her small eyes were slightly narrowed, looking at you with a bit of disdain. When she opened her mouth, it was like a string of firecrackers. You little bitch that deserves to be hacked to death. You were born to be a ghost that wants to collect debts. This old lady worked so hard to raise you up, one mouthful at a time, one mouthful at a time, one mouthful at a time, not to let you. Thinking of this, Xiu couldn't help but shiver. It was too scary. She quickly got up and walked out. Big stone, Miss Luan, I'll go back first. Seeing her figure run away, Gu Shengyin wiped the dishes in her hands and put them away. She turned back and asked Shirley, you lied to her? Shirley didn't expect to be seen through at a glance. He was obviously a little embarrassed. He smiled a little embarrassedly. I saw that she had been pestering you endlessly. I saw that you had been enduring for a long time and didn't say anything for the sake of your face. Even Shirley could see through it. Gu Shengyin thought that she had made it very obvious. But Xiu pretended to be stupid. Especially, didn't the plot say that she was a surgeon? Gu Shengyin had been injured for so long, but she had never heard her say anything like what she should pay attention to. It was obvious that she only wanted benefits but didn't want to pay at all. Since ancient times, sincerity was exchanged for sincerity. But she had never heard of a saying that one could exchange for sincerity with one's mouth. But Shirley looked at Gu Shengyin and agreed with Xiu's words in his heart. I think there are some parts of what she said are right. People like Luan are not suitable for this kind of work. Shirley said seriously to Gu Shengyin. What's wrong? Gu Shengyin asked curiously. Shirley frowned and seemed to be thinking hard about something. When I was young, I once heard an old teacher tell a story in class. It was about an emperor who obtained a fairy-like beauty. In order to keep that beauty and make her happy, he used gold to build a palace for her. Every day, he raised her with all kinds of precious jewels, beautiful clothes, and unparalleled delicacies. Shirley looked at Gu Shengyin and blushed. I don't know how beautiful the fairy-like beauty in the story is, but I think Luan is even prettier than the fairy-like beauty in my imagination. Pfft! Gu Shengyin couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. It turned out that the story of keeping a mistress in a golden house also existed in this world. She was so happy because of this alternative version of the story that she did not notice that Shirley was staring at this rare beauty with a smile. Shirley felt his heart beating very fast. Even when he was fighting against the strongest wild boar in the forest, he was not this excited. When his mother was still alive, she once touched little Shirley's hair and told him the story of the cowherd and the Vega in the sky. In the story, when the cowherd saw the Vega, his heart beat very fast, as if it was going to jump out of his chest in the next moment. His mother said that the cowherd was moved by the fairy-like beauty in the sky. Chapter 1071. If the cowherd fell in love with the fairy in the sky, what about himself? If the cowherd ended up marrying the fairy in the sky, what about himself? Shirley clutched his chest and silently glanced at Gu Shengyin, who still had a smile on her face. He lowered his head sadly. Such a beautiful Alwan, it was impossible to stay in this forest, right? She would eventually return to the big city. At that time, there would also be people who would build a palace with gold for her, using countless precious jewels and beautiful clothes, just to make her smile. How could she still remember the silent and mute big rock in this desolate mountain forest? Gu Xingyin sensitively sensed that he seemed to be in low spirits. She withdrew her smile and looked at Shirley with concern. What's wrong with you? Shirley shook his head. He did not know how to hide his emotions. Even if he wanted to smile, he could not. I'm fine. He hurriedly left this sentence and turned to leave the house, as if there was a scourge behind him. Gu Xingyin looked strangely at Shirley, who suddenly became gloomy and left, and asked curiously, did something happen that I did not notice? The system, who saw all this, also did not understand what happened and replied, I don't understand. Host, the human emotional world is the most complicated thing. Even if the most precise calculation is activated, it will not be able to analyze anything. Gu Xingyin gave up on discussing emotions with the system. For the next 2 days, Gu Xingyin felt that Shirley was avoiding her. In the past, he would sit with her for a while after dinner. Although they did not talk much, the atmosphere between them was not bad. But now, Shirley would still come back on time for dinner, but he would not take the initiative to talk. He seemed to have really become a silent rock. Gu Xingyin did not ask him about it. She asked the system, and nothing happened to him. So, was he unhappy because of her? Fortunately, on the 3rd day, Shirley seemed to have changed back to the previous Shirley. He seemed to have figured something out. He no longer avoided Gu Xingyin's eyes, and the smile on his face increased. The system expressed that the human world was indeed too complicated. It really didn't understand. Gu Xingyin also expressed that even after being a person from so many worlds, she still couldn't understand human emotions. Another piece of good news for Gu Xingyin was that Xiao had not come for 2 days. Gu Xingyin was overjoyed when he heard the system's feedback. It turned out that it was Auntie Zhou, Xiao's mother. She insisted that her daughter must have been possessed by something strange. Otherwise, how could she explain why her obedient and hard-working daughter suddenly became a lazy and evil girl who even talked back to her mother? She specially killed a chicken and invited the most famous witch in the village, Wang Pe, to exorcise the evil spirit for Xiao. But how could there be a real witch in this world? That old lady Wang usually relied on tricking the villagers to make a living. But Axia suffered. She was held down and beaten with a chicken feather blanket. It was called beating ghosts. Then, she was closed and drank 2 big bowls of ash water, and even drank a mouthful of rooster blood. After being tormented like this, Axia was completely obedient. No matter what she thought in her heart, at least on the surface, she finally changed back to the hard-working, obedient, well-behaved and shy Axia. Chapter 1072. Just like that, a month passed by peacefully. Gu Xingyin could feel that her injuries were almost healed. She didn't like to go out since she stayed in the village every day. The reason was simple: this village was almost isolated from the rest of the world. No one had come here for decades. Now there was a stranger, and a beautiful girl that no one in the village had ever seen. Every time Gu Xingyin went out, the whole village would stand at the side and look at him as if they were looking at a rare object. It was really awkward. Now that she had finally recovered, there was still more than a month before the people of Tianzi country came to find her and she recovered her memory. Gu Xingyin was thinking about how to make Shirley agree to take her out to hunt. When Shirley came back, he saw Gu Xingyin standing in the yard. He had exchanged a leopard skin for the clothes she was wearing from Auntie Zhang's house in the village. The material was light blue, and there wasn't even a pattern on it. However, Gu Xingyin just stood there quietly without any makeup on, making the winter jasmine that peeked in from the side of the fence lose its color. All one, what are you thinking about? Shirley now got along with Gu Xingyin much more naturally. He thought it through. Anyway, it was impossible for him and All want to be together. Then he would take care of her while she stayed in the village. At least, he could leave a good memory for himself. Gu Xingyin turned around and looked at Shirley. I seem to have remembered something just now. Shirley was delighted. You remembered? Gu Xingyin shook her head, just a fragmented memory. She suddenly stretched out her hand and broke off the flower branch beside her. Then, with a shake of her wrist, she suddenly drew a beautiful sword flower. Shirley stared at her with his eyes wide open. This, if he didn't see wrong, what was that? He clearly felt a murderous aura from the seemingly weak flower branch. I think I know some martial arts. Martial arts? Shirley's eyes lit up. Men like them who lived in the mountains relied on brute force to hunt. How could they learn any martial arts? Regardless of whether it was martial arts or books, they were all extremely luxurious and rare items to them. Gu Xingyin's eyes swept over his strong body, and her eyes lit up. Why don't we compare notes? Shirley looked at her slender body and hesitated. That's not good, is it? Gu Xingyin's eyes turned cold. Are you looking down on me? Since she had already said so, what could Shirley do? He obediently put down the things in his hands and prepared to spar with her. Shirley had originally thought that he was just playing with Al Wan, so he had held back a little. However, the moment he started fighting, he realized that he had completely underestimated the woman in front of him. A delicate flower branch had become an omnipotent weapon in her hands. Every time the flower branch attacked him at a very tricky angle, it was impossible for him to guard against it. Then, when he was not paying attention, it would hit him without leaving a trace. The force was not strong, but it was always enough to make him shrink back in pain. How is it? Gu Xingyin withdrew her hand and asked. The flower branch in her hand had already become a bare branch. The petals on it could not bear the force when she hit him and scattered all over the ground. Al Wan is so powerful. Shirley's eyes sparkled. He was not angry at all that he had been hit so many times. Chapter 1073. Gu Xingyin slowly calmed her breathing. She had rested for such a long time, so she still couldn't get used to this sudden change. Gu Xingyin looked at him. Do you want to learn? Why wouldn't he want to? Shirley nodded repeatedly. Al Wan was so weak, but she always caught him off guard. He had brute force, but it was useless against Al Wan. No matter how strong you are, it's useless if you can't hit someone, right? Then I can teach you. Gu Xingyin agreed readily. In her heart, there was nothing that she couldn't share with the person in front of her. Shirley hesitated. I heard that things like martial arts, like learning, can't be taught to outsiders. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. This person was too honest. She said lightly, it's not taught to outsiders. You're not an outsider. Shirley blushed again because of her words. Al Wan said that he wasn't an outsider. Did that mean that in her heart, she also, stop? He forced himself to calm down. Shirley, don't think too much. That will never belong to you. If there was no hope, there would be no disappointment. To Gu Xingyin's surprise, when she proposed to go hunting with Shirley, the other party didn't object and directly nodded in agreement. She felt that it was strange. After more than a month of getting along, she was very sure that the other party cared about her very much. But if he cared about her, why did he dare to let her go hunting with him? It was such a dangerous thing. Shirley's answer was simple. I've been hunting in this forest since I was young, so I'm very familiar with it. There aren't any powerful beasts. Usually, I can handle it alone. Al Wan, you're so powerful. How could anything happen to you? So he was so sure of her strength. The next day, Gu Xingyin tied a dagger to her waist and carried a bow on her back. She set off with Shirley. When the villagers saw them, especially Gu Xingyin's outfit, they were very surprised. Some people even asked on the spot. When they learned that Gu Xingyin was going out to hunt, several people laughed out loud. First Aunt Zhou said in a particularly loud voice, hunting has always been a man's business since ancient times. Why are you, a woman, joining in the fun? Moreover, what can a delicate girl like you do there? When the time comes, Big Stone will have to take care of you while hunting. Tell me, what are you thinking? She didn't finish her sentence because Gu Xingyin glanced at her. When eldest Aunt Zhou was swept by that gaze, she felt as if her throat was suddenly choked by something. She could not say another word. She was clearly such a delicate girl, and she didn't have any fierce expression. With just a faint glance, eldest Aunt Zhou felt as if she had suddenly fallen into an ice cave in the cold winter. She raised her head and looked at the sun in the sky. Could it be that the sun was too bright today and she was hallucinating? Gu Xingyin finally knew why a Xiao hated this eldest Aunt Zhou so much. Her mouth was really unpleasant. When Gu Xingyin saw that eldest Aunt Zhou had shut up, she nodded with satisfaction and said, "I've never heard of a rule that says women can't hunt. There's also no rule that says women need men to protect them." The surrounding villagers who were watching the fun all shut their mouths. They silently watched the two people walk into the dense forest behind the mountain village. Chapter 1074. Gu Xingyin and Shirlei walked into the forest. After coming out of the mountain village, Shirlei did not speak, which made Gu Xingyin feel a little strange. She turned her head and found that he had been looking at her with sparkling eyes. Gu Xingyin was a little amused. She asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Shirlei's face suddenly turned red when he was caught peeping at her. He stammered, "No, nothing. I was just thinking about what Luan said just now. I think it's very novel and reasonable." Such words were probably the most honest and sincere praise from a man living in the mountains. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to tease him. "Oh. Then tell me, what's the reason?" Shirlei's face turned even redder when he heard this. He didn't know what the reason was. He simply felt that Luan was different from the women in the mountain village. This difference was not only referring to her rare beauty and elegant behavior, but also to what she did and what she said. Shirlei couldn't explain it, but he just felt that Luan was different from others. He shook his head and said, "I can't explain it." Then he looked at Gu Xingyin and said seriously, "But I just think what Luan said is very reasonable. If what she said didn't make sense, why couldn't those people in the mountain village refute her words?" Shirlei's ears were red as he thought about it. Gu Xingyin looked at his honest appearance and his heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to say something, his ears twitched. Shirlei also seemed to have noticed something. He was about to say, "There's prey coming," then he saw the woman beside him turn her left hand and the longbow on her back was already in her hand. She neatly nocked an arrow with her right hand. Almost at the same time, the arrow flew out like lightning in a certain direction. In the dense forest where the branches and leaves were trembling, there was the scream of an animal. They rushed over and saw that the arrow that Gu Xingyin had just shot was firmly stuck in a pheasant. The pheasant was not completely dead. Half of its body was stained with blood, and its body was still twitching and struggling. Gu Xingyin saw this and stepped forward to lift the pheasant up. She neatly twisted its neck and pulled the arrow out. Then, she turned around and met Shirlei's dumbfounded gaze. "What's wrong? Are you frightened by me?" she asked. Shirlei came back to his senses and looked at the pheasant in Gu Xingyin's hand. He still couldn't believe it. No, I just didn't expect. Luan, you are really amazing." Shirlei looked at Gu Xingyin his eyes. How could there be a woman like Luan in this world? She was so beautiful, she could reason, she knew martial arts, and she was so good at archery. Shirlei lowered his head and thought about it carefully. Compared to Luan, he was a grown man, but he couldn't compare to her at all. As he thought of this, he felt dejected again. People in the mountains were simple and honest and didn't know how to hide their thoughts. He felt dejected and his face showed a sense of loss. Gu Xingyin looked at him and it wasn't difficult to guess what he was thinking. She comforted him. "Although I don't remember anything, look at my martial arts and archery. I must have hired a famous teacher to teach me. You relied completely on your talent. The two can't be compared." Although Shirlei felt that Luan's words were a bit awkward, he could still hear that she was comforting him. Luan was really a very good woman, he thought. Chapter 1075. Gu Xingyin looked at Shirlei, who had everything written on his face, and only felt that it was very interesting. She had seen his domineering, cold, and arrogant look many times, but this time, she felt that it was very fresh. It was also the easiest to get along with such a person. Shirley put the pheasant that Gu Xingyin had caught into the basket on his back, and the two of them continued to walk forward. Hunters relied on this forest to make a living, and also relied on the weather to make a living. Now was a good time, of course, they had to store more food, otherwise, when the season of rain and snow came, life would not be easy. Then, Gu Xingyin saw that she had just praised Shirley's talent. When he found the wild beast, Shirley's face lit up. This forest was closer to the mountain village, and it was not deep into the forest, so it was rare to encounter such a large wild beast. But it was too dangerous deep in the mountains, and only when the village was really short of food, would a few strong hunters form a team and go further into the mountains to search for food. Of course, Shirley would not go to such a dangerous place with Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin looked at the wild beast carefully a few times, and found that she did not recognize it. It looked similar to the wild boar in her impression, but it did not have many spikes on its body like the wild boar. The moment she found the wild beast, Gu Xingyin shot the arrow in her hand. But she did not know what material the wild beast's fur was made of, and even with her strength, the arrow could not penetrate it. Even if it had something to do with the fact that Shirley's self-made arrow was not sharp enough. The wild beast's fur was also stronger than any animal that Gu Xingyin had seen before. Then, when Gu Xingyin was still thinking of a way to get rid of this prey, Shirley had already put down the bow in his hand and pounced on it. Gu Xingyin was shocked. She knew that Shirley only had brute strength, and was afraid that he would get hurt on impulse. Then, she saw a scene that made her eyes widen uncontrollably. Shirley actually used the strength of his two hands to grab the wild beast's front and back legs, and lifted it up. Gu Xingyin, she silently glanced at the beast. It seemed to be at least 500 or 600 pounds. Looking at Shirley's appearance again, he couldn't see the slightest bit of reluctance on his face when he lifted the beast. After that, she watched as Shirley exerted force with both hands and threw the wild beast out. The wild beast flew out and crashed into a tree, breaking a tree that was about 10 inches wide. The beast let out a sound similar to an anguished wail. Its movements were somewhat sluggish as it got up and ran towards the forest. Obviously, it understood that its opponent was not a simple character and planned to escape. But now that he finally saw such a big prey, how could Shirley let it escape? His eyes were burning with fighting spirit as he chased after the wild beast. An injured beast was also a hunter with great strength. Gu Xingyin didn't even need to look to guess the outcome. She watched as Shirley tied up the beast with a rope and dragged it on the ground. The corner of the beast's mouth was full of blood, and it was no longer breathing. Ah, won. Shirley smiled, revealing his white teeth. We have a great harvest today. We can go back early. It was indeed a great harvest. Gu Xingyin glanced at the huge beast and estimated that according to their appetite, if they ate it every day, it would be enough to last them for at least 2 months. Chapter 1076. When the two of them dragged the beast back, they attracted a crowd of onlookers in the village. Aunt Zhou seemed to have forgotten what happened in the morning. She looked at the big beast in Shirley's hand enviously. She opened her mouth and said, "Aya, let me see. What did this big stone bring back? It's so big. It must be bigger than dumb insect, right? I'm afraid that the two of you can't finish this meat, right? Aya, our man hasn't come back today. I don't know if he can get enough food for our family today." Did she mean that she wanted a share of the soup? However, when Shirley heard this, he immediately laughed. "Aunt Zhou, it just so happens that I can't finish this thing." "Why don't?" Gu Xingyin saw the joy in Aunt Zhou's eyes. She faintly continued the conversation. "Why don't we dry and marinate the meat? It can be stored for a long time. We can eat it slowly." Aunt Zhou's smile suddenly froze on her face. Shirley looked at Gu Xingyin with some confusion. He didn't understand why she suddenly spoke. However, when she said this, Shirley swallowed back the words that he wanted to say. Could it be that Wan liked to eat this beast's meat? He thought about it. Since Wan liked it, then he wouldn't share it with Aunt Joe's family. What if Wan didn't have enough to eat? Let's go back. Gu Shengyin said to Shirley. I'm a little tired today. When he heard Gu Shengyin say that she was tired, Shirley didn't care about anything else. He hurriedly asked nervously, tired? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Does the wound still hurt? Let's go back quickly. The two of them talked to each other like this and forgot about First Aunt Joe. First Aunt Joe's fat face was very interesting. Her lips trembled and she turned around to see Xiao looking at them from the gate. She finally scolded with a trembling voice, shameless lowly wench, a loser who lives off a woman. I think you can only rely on men to support you in the future. Xiao silently listened to this woman's abuse. After these few days, she was used to this woman. As long as this woman was unhappy, she would come back and use her as a punching bag. Anyway, in her eyes, her daughter was born to collect debts, wasn't she? Axiu also knew who she really wanted to scold. However, she didn't dare to scold that person, so she could only use herself to scold him indirectly. Why was it that even though he had transmigrated, he was still the one being oppressed and bullied? Axiu didn't believe it. She didn't believe that she had transmigrated just to live a hard life in a mountain village. She also did not believe that she would live in such a small village for the rest of her life, marry an illiterate mountain man in a few years, and then live in such a small place for the rest of her life. She used to think that she could rely on Chu Feilwan to get out, but Chu Feilwan didn't even want to talk to her. In that case, he could only think of a way himself. She slowly lowered her eyes. Eldest Aunt Zhou got angry when she saw her like this. Although her daughter had been more obedient recently, her personality had become more and more gloomy. Finally, she had a sullen face. No one knew what she was thinking about. It made people panic when they saw her. Why are you standing here like a block of wood? Have you washed the clothes at home? Have you peeled the corn in the yard? Do you really think you're a female bodhisattva? As long as you sit and don't do any work, the house doesn't raise idle people. Chapter 1077. Does Wan like to eat wild beast meat? Shirley asked. Gu Shengyin turned her head strangely. She didn't understand why he asked this question. Looking at her expression, Shirley knew that he was probably wrong. He explained embarrassedly, when I heard you say that, I thought you liked to eat this meat very much. Gu Shengyin connected the dots and understood what Shirley meant. He thought that she liked to eat this wild beast meat, so he didn't want her to share it with others. Gu Shengyin. No, I've never seen such a wild beast. Shirley didn't understand. If that's the case, why? At this moment, the two of them had returned to Shirley's yard. Shirley put down the game in his hand. Gu Shengyin said lightly, nothing. I just feel that it's a waste to give the game you worked so hard to catch to someone like that. Shirley turned his head to look at her. Gu Shengyin had been here for more than a month, but she had never seen Aunt Zhou take out anything from home to give Shirley. Even if he was injured, Shirley would ask Aunt Zhang, who was far away from home, for help, not Aunt Zhou, who was just a fence away. This showed that in Shirley's heart, he knew who would really help him. Today, listening to the conversation between Aunt Zhou and Shirley, and hearing Aunt Zhou's familiar tone, Gu Shengyin knew that she had done this kind of thing often. And looking at Shirley's appearance, he had probably never refused her. But Gu Shengyin didn't see any gratitude to Shirley from Aunt Zhou. For some people, if you were good to them, they wouldn't be able to return the same kindness. On the contrary, you would raise their hearts and make them want to bite a bigger piece of meat from you all the time. Aunt Zhou was such a person. Gu Shengyin always kept a respectful distance from such people. However, Shirley suddenly laughed. Gu Shengyin looked at him inexplicably. She did not understand what was wrong with this man all of a sudden. Shirley looked at her and said with a smile, actually, I know what Wan said. I know what kind of person Aunt Zhou is. I don't expect her to remember my good deeds and help me when there's a problem. It's just that I feel that I'm still young and strong. I can't finish all these things anyway. Gu Xingyin said, then clean it up and send it to Auntie Zhang and Uncle Wang at the entrance of the village. The smile on Shirley's face never faded. Okay. The few families that Wan mentioned would always remember to leave a portion for him whenever they had something. Shirley was very happy. Wan was speaking up for him. She was thinking for him. Did this mean that he had some status in her heart? After all, if she really didn't care, she wouldn't be afraid of being taken advantage of, nor would she care about how she dealt with her own things. Gu Xingyin watched Shirley slaughter the prey, wash it, cut the meat into large pieces, strung it with a straw rope and dried it in the yard. Then, he carried a basket with some meat in it and went to deliver things to people. Before he left, he had already cleaned the yard and was especially careful to move out a bench for Gu Xingyin so that she could lie down and bask in the sun for a while. However, Gu Xingyin didn't enjoy the spring sunshine for long before an unexpected guest came to the yard. Chapter 1078. Miss Wan. The person who came was a Xiao, whom she had not seen for a long time. Gu Xingyin raised her head to look at her. From the looks of it, Xiao had not been living very well during this period of time. Her originally plump figure had now slimmed down, her face was somewhat haggard, and her eyes were gloomy. She did not even look as lively and cute as before. What's the matter? Miss Xiao? The eldest brother of the Shi family is not home. If you want to find him, you can come back later. Gu Xingyin said lazily. Xiao looked at her with some jealousy. This woman, even if she was plotted against and fell off a cliff, even if she came to such an isolated and poor mountain village, she still lived so freely. Her face was rosy and her eyes were lazy. It was obvious that she was very satisfied with such a life. Xiao thought maliciously. If this woman knew what kind of life she was supposed to be living, would she still be so free? I came here specially to find you, Miss Wan. Xiao looked at Gu Xingyin and said. Gu Xingyin looked at her. Her meaning was obvious. If you have something to say it quickly. She was clearly standing and Gu Xingyin was half lying down, but Xiao always felt that the other party was looking down at her. Some people, even if they lost their memories, the pride and reserve engraved in their bones could not be erased. Xiao considered her words and said, Miss Wan, you should know that you don't belong to this place. Look at your clothes and appearance. You should be in a big city, enjoying fine clothes and delicious food, and being served by groups of maidservants. You shouldn't be in a place like this, where you have to personally hunt and do things that a peasant woman would do. After she finished speaking, she looked at Gu Xingyin, waiting for her reaction. Unfortunately, Gu Xingyin did not give her any reaction. She said lazily, oh, perhaps. I don't remember anything. Xiao was furious when she heard this. How come she had never heard that the Qinghuan king had such a lazy personality after losing her memories? Wasn't she supposed to be a domineering and cold beauty? She was unhappy in her heart, so her tone naturally carried a hint of disappointment. You're living a leisurely life here, but do you know how many people are looking for you outside? Your family members must be very anxious right now. Don't you think about them? Gu Xingyin's expression didn't even change when she heard this. Thank you for worrying about me, Miss Xiao, but I don't have any memories of the past. Even if I want to go out, I don't know who to look for. It's better to recuperate first. Axiu, how could there be such a stubborn person in this world? But then again, how could a woman like the Green Phoenix King be so easily swayed by the words of others? After talking for a long time, Gu Xingyin didn't move at all. Xiao knew that her first plan had failed. But it didn't matter. She still had a second step. She said, Miss Wan, I found a kind of herb today. It said that it's very effective in treating injuries and clearing blood stasis. Do you want to try it? Gu Xingyin was a little amused. How could a village girl who had never learned medicine know medicine? It seemed that Xiao really couldn't help it. Chapter 1079. Gu Xingyin was about to refuse when Shirley, who went out to deliver something, came back. Xiao, I watched you grow up. How come I don't know where you learned that medicinal herb? Shirley looked a little bad. He was still carrying an empty basket in his hand. Gu Shengyin looked at it and saw that there seemed to be a fish jumping around in it. He wondered which family saw him send something over and gave him a gift in return. Xiu's eyes flashed when she saw Shirley. When she first came to this world, it was not that she did not have thoughts about Shirley. This man was handsome, had a good figure, and a good temper. If he was in the world she came from, he would definitely be the best choice for a good husband. But she finally gave up the idea. No matter what, he was just a mountain village hunter. It was impossible for her to stay in this place. When she went out, she would not be afraid that she could not find a better man. In her heart, she still looked down on people like Shirley who lived in the mountains. Hearing Shirley's words, she retorted with some indignation, "I learned it from the doctor at the entrance of the village." Shirley replied to her rudely, "I just came back from Uncle Wang and Dr. Li at the entrance of the village. Dr. Li did not tell me that he knew any medicinal herbs that could clear blood and remove blood stasis." His words made Xiu's face turn red and white. Shirley continued, Xiu, sure too has watched you grow up. I really don't know what's wrong with you recently. If you don't know something, don't talk nonsense. You can't talk about things that you've drunk. Be careful that Aunt Zhou will scold you again." Xiu saw that the two people did not believe her and heard Shirley mention Aunt Zhou. She knew that her plan was probably hopeless. She went out with a bad face. Shirley saw her leave and said to Gu Shengyin, "I always feel that Xiu has been strange recently. If she says anything to you, you must not believe it." Gu Shengyin nodded, "Don't worry." She changed the topic. "I think that fish is quite fat. Where did it come from?" Shirley glanced at it and said with a smile, "Auntie Zhang gave me one of the fish her son caught in the river today. Let's have fish soup for lunch today." Gu Shengyin glanced at him. "Did you get any gifts from Aunt Zhou's family in return?" Shirley looked at her and smiled. "I know. You don't look like such a petty person." Their relationship progressed very quickly. He could now speak to Gu Shengyin in such a relaxed tone. Based on Shirley's understanding of Al Wan, she obviously didn't care about money and treasures. He didn't know why she was so against Aunt Zhou's family. Gu Shengyin glanced at him. "Do you think I care about those pieces of meat? I just feel that since you've worked so hard to hunt this prey, why bother to pay respects to that ingrate?" It was fine to say that she was narrow-minded or calculative, but she just didn't want to. Shirley continued to smile. I know. You're doing it for my own good." She clearly cared about him. How could Al Wan be so considerate? Shirley thought happily in his heart. Sure enough, there was no woman better than Al Wan in this world. The two of them happily drank a pot of fish soup, and the days passed leisurely and leisurely. Gu Shengyin calculated the time. Tianzi's people should find them in half a month. Her memory was about to be restored. Chapter 1080. Gu Shengyin went hunting with Shirley every day and only came back when it was time to eat. When she was at home, Shirley was also there, so Xiu didn't have a chance to look for her again. When the two of them returned to the courtyard, Gu Shengyin paused as soon as she entered the courtyard. She glanced around the entire courtyard without looking for traces. Shirley looked at her in confusion. "What's wrong with Al Wan?" Gu Shengyin withdrew her gaze and said, "Nothing." She put down the things in her hands and watched Shirley take the things to the river to wash. "System, this courtyard has been tampered with." The system replied, "Yes, host, there are a few herbs mixed in with the weeds by the fence." Gu Shengyin walked over and pushed the weeds aside. Sure enough, there were a few palm-sized green grasses growing inside. The grasses didn't look different from the surrounding grasses, but there were some spots growing on the edges of the leaves. Looking at it like this, it looked like ordinary grasses with worms growing on them. But it wasn't worms, it was the grass that originally grew like this. Moreover, Gu Shengyin recognized this herb. It was because she recognized this herb that she was a little curious about where Xiu found it. Poisonous wolf spot, an extremely rare poisonous herb. How poisonous was this herb? Not to mention that it could kill at the sight of blood, it even had a characteristic that the poison could spread through the air. It was fine to encounter it occasionally, but if it grew in the courtyard like now where people had to stay for a long time every day, then within 3 days, the people in the courtyard would have symptoms of dizziness, nausea and drowsiness. If it wasn't discovered and treated in time, it was likely that they would fall into a coma. And if it was directly taken by mouth, within 2 hours, the person's body would be covered with red spots, itching incessantly, and die of the poison. Gu Xingyin stared at the poisonous wolf spot for a while, then silently covered it with the weeds again. The next day, when she went hunting, she silently picked a few herbs from a place. She knew that there would be amaranth grass that could cure the poisonous wolf spot's poison. Shirley looked at the thing in her hand and felt a little strange. Why did you pick 2 stalks of grass? Gu Xingyin removed the soil from the roots and put the amaranth into the basket on her back. I recognize this. It's good for your health. It's easy for people to fall sick during this season. Let's boil this later tonight. We'll drink a bowl each. Shirley was silent for a moment. He lowered his head and asked, Al Wan, during this period of time, I see that you are remembering more and more things. Are you about to remember the past? Gu Xingyin didn't understand the meaning behind his words. She nodded and said, I do remember a lot of things. I also know how to use some of the things I saw. However, I still can't remember the key things. I think it will take some time. Shirley replied with an, oh, to show that he understood and did not say anything. He should be happy. He had long known that Al Wan was not from this place. She would leave this place one day, wouldn't she? Hearing the news that she was slowly recovering her memories, why was he not only unhappy, but also a little sad? It was probably because he was afraid that she would leave after remembering everything. She would leave this mountain village and return to her big city. He didn't know if Al Wan would still remember him in the future. Chapter 1081. Shirley tried his best to convince himself not to have such selfish thoughts. But he couldn't hold it in. Gu Xingyin looked at him, who was hanging his head and looking downcast, like a big dog that desperately needed its owner's comfort. Gu Xingyin silently resisted the urge to pinch his furry head. This man, why was he like a child, throwing a tantrum at the slightest disagreement? Gu Xingyin thought to herself in distress. Sigh, it seemed that she would have to teach him a good lesson in the future, so that he could be tough. Otherwise, it would be fine if he stayed in this mountain village, but when he went to Tianzhe capital in the future, wouldn't he be played to death by those scheming nobles? She only asked with a puzzled expression, Big brother Shir, what's wrong? Shirley had been walking silently with his head lowered, but when he heard Gu Xingyin's words, he suddenly raised his head. He stared closely at Gu Xingyin's face, his heart filled with all kinds of thoughts. He wanted to say those unspeakable thoughts that were hidden in the deepest part of his heart, but he didn't dare to. He was afraid that she would despise him and scold him for being a toad lusting after a swan's flesh. But he couldn't help it. Now, there were only the 2 of them, in this dense forest where there were no other people. In her eyes, there was only him. Shirley's lips moved, but in the end, he still said what was on his mind. I was thinking that after Al Wan regains her memories, we will leave this place. I can't bear to. After he said this, he quickly lowered his head as if he was hiding from something. He didn't dare to look at Gu Xingyin's expression, and he didn't dare to listen to what she was going to say next. But his heart was beating so fast, and his ears were pricked up uncontrollably, waiting for the other party's reaction. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment, as if she didn't expect him to say such words. In her heart, after she regained her memories, she would definitely leave this place, and Shirley would definitely leave this place with her. She had thought too much, and had never considered whether Shirley would be willing to leave the big mountain where he grew up, and follow her to a completely foreign place. Gu Xingyin felt as if a basin of ice water had melted in her heart. Her mind cleared up. Her voice also turned cold. So Big Brother sure doesn't intend to leave with me? Shirley raised his head in astonishment. Huh? Seeing him like this, Gu Xingyin was even more certain of her thoughts. It turned out that he had no intention of leaving with her at all. Gu Xingyin's heart was filled with irritation, and he felt very annoyed. However, Shirley's eyes slowly lit up. Did Al-Wan mean that he could go with her? Why didn't he think of that? Al-Wan wouldn't stay, but he could leave with her. He didn't have any other requests. He just wanted to stay by her side quietly, watch over her, and protect her. When Gu Xingyin raised her head again, she saw that the other party was so excited that his face was red and his eyes were burning as he looked at her. Gu Xingyin. What just happened? Shirley looked at her, and his eyes were bright. Can I leave here with Al-Wan? When he said this, his tone was filled with uncontrollable excitement, as if the matter of leaving with Al-Wan was something worth celebrating to him. Gu Xingyin looked at Shirley, and her heart suddenly became clear. It turned out that it was her own thinking that had never been on the same level as the other party. Chapter 1082. She had always thought that it was certain that they would leave together, so she had never thought that they would be separated. As for Shirley, he had always thought that they would be separated when she regained her memories and left. So every time he heard that she was leaving, he would be unhappy and depressed. It turned out that it was not that he was unwilling to leave with her, but that he had never dared to think that he would be able to leave with her. This man, Gu Xingyin, looked at the man who was so emotional that his face had turned red. She only felt a slight heartache spreading in her heart. Was he not confident? He felt that his status was low, so he did not dare to dream of anything that did not belong to him. Gu Xingyin, who understood Shirley's thoughts, felt her eyes sting. She raised her head slightly and forced the bitterness back into her eyes. Then, she revealed a smile. Of course, I still have to rely on Big Brother Shir to bring me out. Gu Xingyin replied. Shirley looked at Gu Xingyin's smile and blushed. This was the second time he had seen Al-Wan smile. Unlike the first time, this time, when Al-Wan smiled, her eyes were filled with him. Her expression was gentle and her gaze was warm. If a stranger came to this forest and saw Al-Wan like this, he would definitely think that he was looking at a fairy from the mountains. Shirley felt that Al-Wan was really beautiful when she smiled. If only she could smile more. When he heard Gu Xingyin's question, Shirley realized that he had unknowingly said what was on his mind. His face turned even redder, and he stammered, "No, nothing, I didn't say anything just now." Gu Xingyin, who had heard her words clearly, was speechless. Did she really think that he wouldn't be able to hear her just because she said that? She looked at the uneasy Shirley and sighed inwardly. Big Brother Shir, you are my savior. You don't have to be so restrained in front of me. Every time Shirley faced him, he would become very nervous. Gu Xingyin had noticed this problem from the beginning, but Shirley's attitude had become more and more natural recently. She thought it would get better slowly, but obviously, the remaining half a month was not enough for Shirley to face her freely. If he couldn't face others frankly and generously, he would be at a disadvantage in front of his subordinates in the future. Shirley was a little embarrassed as he clenched the basket in his hand. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but every time he saw Al-Wan looking at him with those beautiful eyes, he felt his mind go blank. Under such circumstances, it was already very impressive that he could speak and do things normally. Gu Xingyin did not know. She thought that Shirley treated everyone the same way. But that wasn't the case. She didn't know how special she was to this man who was born and raised in the mountains. She was the only one who could change him. Back at home, Gu Xingyin did not waste any time. She boiled the water and made a pot of medicinal soup with those herbs. She and Shirley drank 2 bowls each. Seeing Shirley take the black liquid from her hand and pour it into his mouth without changing his expression, Gu Xingyin felt a warm current in her heart. She still remembered that Shirley had doubted Xiu's words and said that he must be careful when drinking something into his mouth. However, he drank the medicine she handed to him without hesitation. Chapter 1083. Sometimes, a person's attitude towards you could be seen from these little things. After the two drank the medicine, Gu Xingyin carefully wrapped the dregs in a clean small bag and tied one to Shirley's waist. Shirley was somewhat puzzled. Gu Xingyin explained, "It seems to be a custom, wearing this can ward off evil spirits. Shirley smirked and touched the small cloth bag on his waist with his fingers, only to feel warm and comfortable in his heart. No one had ever told him about the custom, and no one would sew such a cloth bag for him. How could one be so good? She was so good that his heart was completely occupied by her day by day, and he could no longer separate himself from her. Gu Xingyin did not notice the change in Shirley's mentality. In order not to arouse Ashio's suspicion, she deliberately added a few kinds of fragrant flower seeds in it, completely covering the smell of the dregs. Gu Xingyin did this to prevent trouble before it happened. Although in theory nothing would happen after drinking the antidote, but after all, the poisonous wolf spot was still in the courtyard, it was better to take some protective measures. The next time was to wait for the bait to take the bait. On the third day, Gu Xingyin estimated that it was almost time. That day, after the two finished dinner in the courtyard, Gu Xingyin sent a message to the system. Follow our original plan. The system flashed a white light, indicating that it understood. Then, Shirley was ready to get up and clean the table, but suddenly felt dizzy. Why am I so sleepy? He muttered, and then fell asleep on the table. Host, don't worry, I can guarantee that he will sleep for a whole night. No matter how big the movement is, he will not wake up. Gu Xingyi nodded and sat quietly on the chair, waiting for Ashio's arrival. Until the system reminded her, host, she went out. Gu Xingyin followed Shirley's posture and lay down. A figure appeared outside Shirley's courtyard. It was already night time, and the mountain village was already quiet. The moon was very round, and the clouds in the sky were not as light and cute as they were during the day. At night, they bared their fangs and brandished their claws, revealing their ferocious appearance. The shadow of the intruder was imprinted on the ground, bringing with it a sense of awe-inspiring terror. Axius seemed to be very vigilant. She patiently waited outside the courtyard for a long time. After making sure that the two unconscious people inside would not wake up, she walked in quietly. She walked around the courtyard and even deliberately went to the side of the fence. Wearing gloves, she plucked the few poisonous wolf spots that she had personally planted and put them into the pouch tied around her waist. She walked to the table where the two of them were lying on their stomachs. She seemed a little nervous. After staring at Gu Xingyin for a while, she suddenly turned around and went back. Gu Xingyin was wondering what she was going to do, but at the critical moment, the system said, host, there is an emergency. I need to leave this world temporarily. It will probably take me one night to come back. Gu Xingyin thought that it was not a problem for her to deal with Axiu alone, so she nodded and let the system leave. There were several valuable antidote pills in her sleeve, which were hidden under Chu Failwan's clothes to save her life at a critical moment. Gu Xingyin was afraid that Axiu would use poison again, so she had already prepared them in advance. Axiu did not leave for a long time. When she came back again, she seemed to be in a very good mood, and even her steps were very light. Gu Xingyin was very curious about what she had done. Axiu did not waste time this time. She pulled Gu Xingyin up from the table and then put her on her back. She carried the unconscious Gu Xingyin and walked into the deep mountain at night. Chapter 1084. Gu Xingyin leaned on Axiu's back. Axiu was not fast. After all, Axiu was just a weak girl. It was not easy for her to carry Gu Xingyin, who was taller than her. Gu Xingyin looked at the direction Axiu was walking. She seemed to have a clear goal. Obviously, Axiu even knew where the destination was. She must have been planning for this for a long time. After walking for about an hour, Axiu even stopped to rest twice during this time. They finally arrived at the destination. Without the system, Gu Xingyin could not see the environment around her. But when she was put on the ground, she quickly opened her eyes to take a look. It was a cave. It was very clean inside. Obviously, it had been cleaned by someone. There was hay inside, and there was even a cloth bag on the side. It was very likely that there was food inside. This was what Gu Xingyin saw at a glance. Obviously, this was the place Axiu was going to take action. Gu Shengyin also knew how Axiu lived alone in the deep mountains for so long after killing Chu Failwan in the original plot. It turned out that she was prepared. Axiu put Gu Shengyin on the ground. She sat on the side and panted for a long time. She walked for an hour with a person on her back. In addition, she was excited and nervous about what she was going to do. Her heart beat a little faster. Axiu pressed her chest tightly, finally calming her wildly beating heart a little. She turned her eyes and stared at Gu Shingyin's face, who was facing her with her eyes closed. So beautiful, she murmured. In the world where she came from, technology was very advanced. Those men and women with outstanding looks could even make a living with their looks and become the idols of many people with good looks. It could be said that ordinary people could see countless beauties through some media. But in Axiu's eyes, those men and women who were called the first beauty by the media and were seen once in 1,000 years could not be compared to this woman. In the situation where the news was blocked and there was no publicity, she became the recognized first beauty in the 5 continents and 12 countries. If one didn't see it with their own eyes, it would be hard to imagine. Her greedy eyes scanned every inch of Gu Shingyin's face. Whether it's the shape of the face, the eyes, the beauty, the nose, the mouth, and even the ears, they are all perfect. Her gaze became more and more heated. Soon, this will all be mine. Axiu took the bag that she had prepared for a long time and opened it. There were knives that had been polished until they were smooth, and some herbs that emitted a strange smell. She gently picked up a knife. The knife was very thin, and it reflected a pale white light under the faint light of the oil lamp in the cave. Don't blame me, Qingwan King. I didn't intend to do that. She seemed to be talking to the unconscious Gu Shengyin, but she also seemed to be talking to herself. If you simply accept my goodwill and let me leave this place with you, how great would that be? But you didn't want to talk to me at all. I put down my face, put down my reservations, and tried to please you like a dog. Unfortunately, you didn't accept it at all. I was really forced to the point that I had no other choice. If I continue to stay in this place, I will die. But I don't want to die, so I can only wrong you. She moved her body and came to Gu Shingyin's side. Don't worry, I will use your identity to return to Tianzhe and pass down your name as Qingwan King. Chapter 1085. The silver light was about to fall on Gu Shingyin's face, but it was caught by a white and slender finger. What a sincere monologue, Miss Xiao. A cold and cheerless voice rang out in the empty cave. The temperature in the cave seemed to have dropped because of her voice. Axiu was startled by this sudden sound and her hand trembled. The saber fell to the ground and made a crisp sound. It caused a clear echo in the cave. Gu Shengyin opened her eyes and stood up from the ground. She gently kicked with the tip of her foot, and the small knife was kicked far away. She leaned over and looked at Xiao, who was still sitting on the ground. Now, can you tell me, Miss Xiao, who are you? How could a girl who was born in the mountains and never went out know her identity, and what strange name, King Qingwan? Xiao's face suddenly turned pale. Chu Failwan, you didn't lose your memory. Gu Shengyin gently shook her head. No, I just suddenly remembered. Xiao's face suddenly became dejected. Your Highness, I am just a pitiful girl in the mountains, and I want to borrow your strength to leave this man-eating mountain. As she spoke, she secretly looked at Gu Shingyin's expression. Seeing that the other party's eyes seemed to reveal a trace of compassion, she was overjoyed and slowly stood up. Your Highness, I really don't have any bad intentions. She suddenly waved her sleeve, and a white powder was thrown towards Gu Shengyin. But Xiao didn't even see Gu Shingyin's movements clearly, and the other's figure disappeared in front of her. Then, her neck was strangled by the others. Since Miss Xiao knows who I am, then you must also know that I am someone who has been on the battlefield. Gu Shengyin hit several acupoints of Axiu. She couldn't move in an instant and could only stare at Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin didn't care about her venomous gaze. The first thing this consort wants to tell you is that when you want to kill someone, don't talk so much nonsense. Otherwise, be careful that you don't die from your own nagging. She continued, that's right, I'm talking nonsense with you right now. That's because, she looked at Ah Xiao with disdain. You are no threat to me, Miss Ah Xiao. Xiao glared at Gu Xingyin so hard that her eyes almost bled. Gu Xingyin didn't care at all. Let me guess. You were holding a knife in front of my face. Were you trying to take my life? Or do you want to humiliate me? Let me guess, it should be both, right? It seems that Miss Axia still wants to replace this consort's identity. Gu Xingyin said coldly. Unfortunately, you don't have the ability, and you don't have the life. She knew what kind of words could hurt Xiao the most for a woman with a lofty heart like Xiao. Sure enough, if the gaze could turn into a sharp weapon, Gu Xingyin would have been shot to death by Axiu's venomous gaze. Unfortunately, Axiu's gaze didn't have this ability, so she could only stare. Don't look at me like that. You want to take my life, but I don't intend to take revenge. Thinking about it, I'm really quite kind. Axiu's gaze paused for a moment and looked at Gu Xingyin suspiciously, as if she didn't believe that she would let her go. Chapter 1086. Gu Xingyin suddenly smiled. She seldom smiled. There were two reasons for a beauty who seldom smiled. One was that she was not as good-looking when she smiled. The other was that she was cold and did not like to smile. But when she smiled occasionally, it was extremely stunning. Chu Failwan obviously belonged to the latter. When she smiled like this, Axiu even vaguely felt that the entire dark cave seemed to light up because of her smile. Even though they were both women and she did not want to admit it. But the fact was, Chu Failwan was a woman who was so beautiful that others could not even be jealous of her. However, Axiu's mood didn't improve because of her laughter, nor did she relax because she said that she wouldn't take her life. She did not know Chu Failwan, but she did not believe that a woman who had been undefeated in hundreds of battles, who was crowned as a queen and was respected by the emperors of 3 dynasties, would let go of her after being murdered. Seeing that Xiao did not look happy, Gu Xingyin thought to herself that Xiao was not as naive as she thought. She did not want to waste too much time on such a woman, so she only said one sentence: you can still avoid the evils of heaven, but you can't survive the evils you bring upon yourself. Then, Xiao felt that everything went black and she lost consciousness. She was woken up by the noise of the crowd. When she opened her eyes, she found that she was back at Xiao's house, surrounded by people. It seemed that all the people in this small village had gathered at her house. How could this happen? How could she be so vicious? She must have been possessed by something unclean. She listened to these words in a daze. Finally, she remembered something, and her expression suddenly became frightened. What did she remember? Just last night, before she went to take Gu Xingyin away, she thought that she would never return to this godforsaken place again. She also recalled the insults and disdain that Xiao's family had given her over the past few days. Resentment rose in her heart. She put a handful of powder ground from poisonous wolf spots in the big water tank at home. If it was in the teapot, it might be poured away, but if it was in the water tank, this family would definitely drink water. She just didn't want them to live. If her plan succeeded, she could naturally leave, and this place would no longer have anything to do with her. However, she had failed. Who would have thought that Qing Wan King would recover his memories ahead of time? To her, what was even more unexpected was that Gu Xingyin actually sent her back. She was tied up by the angry villagers and her mouth was gagged. She wanted to quibble, but those people didn't want to listen to her. Eldest Auntie Zhou's entire family was dead. She was the only one left alive. They also found some herbs in her room that had not been packed properly. The only doctor in the village flipped through the medical books and recognized that 3 of the herbs were highly toxic. He didn't recognize the others, but he didn't think they were anything good. Auntie Zhang looked at her and sighed. I watched Xiao grow up. She used to be such a well-behaved girl. Later, I don't know what happened, but she became like this. In my opinion, she must have been bewitched. Hearing this, Wang Pa became excited. Isn't that so? I already knew that something was wrong with her. She must have been possessed by something unclean. Chapter 1087. People in the mountains were simple and ignorant. In addition, Xiu's performance during this period was really suspicious. So, many people agreed with Grandma Wang's words. Someone hesitated and said, "Then what should we do now?" Grandma Wang's face was full of wrinkles. In Xiu's eyes, she was like a devil. She smiled gloomily. Such an evil thing has been tightly tied to Xiu. We can only burn her to death with fire. Aunt Zhang, who was gentle by nature, couldn't bear it. That's too cruel. Grandma Wang was full of energy at this moment. It seemed that if she could really burn Xiu to death this time, she would get immeasurable merits. She turned around and looked at the villagers. You think it's cruel? Think about it. This evildoer can even kill her own parents and siblings. If she is left alive, who can guarantee that she won't have bad thoughts about others? As soon as she said this, everyone was silent. Yes. Xiu didn't even recognize her own parents. What if they were poisoned to death? What if they were harmed in the future? The village was noisy, but Shirley didn't know at all. He came in the morning. After eating with Gu Xingyin, he went hunting in the mountains. In the morning, he was still wondering why he fell asleep directly in the yard last night. Gu Xingyin casually changed the topic with a few words. The two of them were hunting here. The people who stayed in the village had tacitly agreed with Grandma Wang's words. Xiu, who had been listening to the villagers' discussion, opened her eyes wide. Her body was tied up and her mouth was gagged. She could only twist crazily as if she was crazy. But she didn't know that her appearance made people believe that she was really possessed by a ghost. Xiu's mind was full of the words, "Fire, now." She was a surgeon herself and had seen all kinds of burn patients in the hospital. The burned skin, the disgusting and ferocious appearance, the painful wails of the patients, and the condemnation of the people around who didn't listen to her kept repeating in her mind. It could make people crazy. Her struggle was useless. A tall pile of firewood was set up at the entrance of the village. She was even splashed with some oil and tied to the pile of firewood. Under the pile of firewood were 4 corpses covered in white cloth. They were Xiu's parents and 2 younger brothers. The 4 of them died in a rather miserable manner. Even the man who dared to fight with the wild beasts in the village had an ugly expression on his face after seeing this. Wangpa had said this, only by seeing the evil spirit die in front of them with their own eyes would the 4 of them be able to rest in peace. Only then would their souls be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation and become humans again. Axia was already in despair. At this level, unless a miracle appeared, she would not be able to escape no matter what. The flame ignited and instantly leaped onto her skin. Ah! She raised her head, and the feeling of the flames burning her body made her let out a silent scream. It was so painful. Why wasn't she dead? Why did she come to this world? The villagers silently looked at the figure twisting and turning. Some soft-hearted people silently turned their heads away, unable to bear to continue watching, but no one opened their mouth to stop him. By the time Gu Xingyin and Shirley returned to the village, everything was almost over. The body above the bonfire had long lost its vitality. It could not even be called a body now. All that was left was a pile of charcoal. Chapter 1088. Shirley still didn't understand the situation, so he hurried over to ask what had happened. Someone had already told him what had happened to Aunt Zhou's family. How could it be? Shirley was about to step forward when he suddenly thought of something. He said to Gu Xingyin behind him, "Ah Wan, don't follow me." He did not look at the charred corpse. Instead, he lifted the white cloth on one of the corpses. With just a glance, he put down his hand with a bad look. Was it really Xiu who did it? He didn't want to believe that Xiu, who grew up with him, would be such a person. At this time, Wang Pa heard his words and said loudly, "It's not Xiu. Our Xiu is a good girl. It's just that she was possessed by a wandering ghost from who knows where, and that's why she did such a horrible thing." Shirley frowned. He didn't believe in such a strange thing. But everyone saw the change in Xiu. It was as if she was a different person. He couldn't even find a reason to speak for Xiu. And now, she was gone. He sighed silently in his heart and walked back to Gu Xingyin. What's the matter? Gu Xingyin asked. Shirley shook his head. Don't look. Let's go home. In the next few days, Shirley didn't go out to hunt. Instead, he set up a tomb for Aunt Zhou's family with the villagers in the mountain village. At least they could be buried in the ground. But he didn't ask Gu Xingyin to go out. He only said that this kind of thing was inauspicious. As a girl, it was better not to see it. When Xiu's matter was over, Gu Xingyin also felt that it was time to tell Shirley her identity. After dinner, Gu Xingyin suddenly called out to Shirley after he was done packing up. Big brother Shir. She called him softly. Shirley turned his head. He was keenly aware of a change. He looked at Gu Xingyin. The person in front of him still looked the same, but he felt that something was wrong. All one? He panicked for a moment and forced a smile. What happened? Gu Xingyin looked at him quietly. I remember now. Shirley's eyes trembled as he revealed a smile. Congratulations. Gu Xingyin saw a trace of uneasiness in his eyes. She said, My full name is Chu Failwan. I am the princess of Tianzi Kingdom. Shirley widened his eyes. He had long guessed that Wan's identity was not simple, but no matter how he thought about it, he had never thought that she was the princess. In their small mountain village, even the county magistrate was a legendary figure. Not to mention the princess. Wan was actually a princess? It wasn't strange. For a woman like Wan, if she wasn't a princess, who else could be worthy of her? Shirley didn't know what he was feeling right now. Amidst all these thoughts, what he was most concerned about was still, since Wan had regained her memory, did she still mean what she said about leaving this place with her? Shirley really wanted to ask this question. But looking at Gu Xingyin, who seemed to have an additional layer of dignity after regaining her memory, he actually didn't dare to ask. What if Wan refused? In the end, he just smiled and said, It turns out that Wan's identity is so powerful. No wonder, he didn't finish his words because Gu Xingyin came in front of him. She reached out her hand and covered his mouth. If you don't want to say something against your will, don't say it. If you don't want to laugh, don't laugh. Chapter 1089. Tianzi's men came a little faster than expected. On this day, Gu Xingyin was still hunting with Shirley outside when she received a message from the system. The men sent by Emperor Tianzi to look for her had arrived at this small mountain village. What's wrong with Wan? Shirley asked when he saw her expression was a little strange. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and smiled at him. My men are here. Shirley immediately understood what she meant. Did her subordinates come looking for him? The two were not in the mood to hunt, so they packed up and returned to the small mountain village. As soon as they entered, Shirley found that something was wrong. Usually at this time, the mountain village would be lively. But today, it was quiet. Even the little wolf cub raised by Aunt Zhang did not howl. The two walked inside and finally found the reason for all this at the gate of Shirley's courtyard. Dozens of people were densely packed together. They were all wearing armor and holding strong horses in their hands. They stood there without saying a word. How could the mountain people have seen such a scene? After realizing that these knights had no malice towards them, the whole mountain village curiously ran out of their homes and stood there quietly to watch. It was said that they were looking for Miss Wan. After the leading knight heard that a beautiful girl named Wan had come here 2 months ago, he asked for the address of Big Stone's house and ran here to guard. Under such circumstances, Gu Xingyin and Shirley, who came in from outside, made their footsteps extra conspicuous. The knights all looked over at him. Just a glance. A look of excitement appeared on everyone's faces as they knelt down in unison in the direction of Gu Xingyin. Your Highness, we pay our respects to you. The people in the mountain were stunned by this scene. Her Highness? There was a princess in their village who had lived here for more than 2 months. Then, they saw that Miss Wan, who was usually just a little cold, had a serious expression, and her whole momentum seemed to be different from before. Rise. Gu Shengyin said faintly, "It's been hard on you to find this place." The leading knight looked very excited. "It's not hard at all. To be able to find the princess, we don't feel that it's hard at all." He glanced at Gu Shengyin's coarse hemp clothes and felt that the princess had suffered a lot in the past few months. "Your Highness has suffered a lot during this period of time." Gu Shengyin shook her head. "No. I am indebted to the people of this mountain village for taking care of me during this period of time. I have not suffered any grievances." The leading knight didn't say anything, but in his heart, he still felt that the princess was just comforting him. He looked around the place. How could he not feel aggrieved in such a place? A casual female knight came over with something in her hands. "Your Highness, please change your clothes and follow us back to the capital." "All right." Gu Shengyin glanced at Shirley beside her. "Prepare a set of clothes and a horse for him to leave with me." "Yes." Hearing this, those knights looked at Shirley curiously. They didn't know what this mountain hunter had done to attract the princess's attention. However, Shirley pursed his lips. Although he knew that the princess's life must be full of attendants, he still felt a little confused when he saw the valiant knights with his own eyes. Chapter 1090. Unlike Shirley, who was at a loss, the other people in the mountain only felt unusually excited when they saw this scene. Shirley, who was able to leave this place with Gu Shengyin, was also very envious. "Miss Luan is the princess?" "I knew it. Miss Luan is so beautiful. How could she be an ordinary person? Why is Big Stone so lucky?" In fact, these mountain people did not understand what Her Highness represented at all. However, just this group of knights was enough to broaden their horizons. In their eyes, Shirley, who was able to leave this place with Gu Shengyin, had also become a person of great fortune. Soon, Gu Shengyin changed her clothes and came out. Shirley had never seen such a dazzling one. She was wearing a silver armor. Her hair was tied up with a white jade crown and a white cloak of the same color was draped over her shoulders. She had always been beautiful, but this beauty, under the exquisite and gorgeous makeup, showed an even more shocking effect. Even those knights who had seen Chu Failwan in this way for many times would be amazed each time they saw her. Not to mention the villagers. Gu Shengyin did not linger. She glanced at Shirley and a knight brought a horse over. "Do you know how to ride a horse?" The man was very friendly. After all, this man was the princess's savior and the person she wanted to take away. No one dared to look down on him. "Yes." Shirley nodded. Another knight brought a large bag and handed it to the village chief. "This is a gift from the princess. She has been here for a long time. Thank you for taking care of her." The old village chief's hands were trembling. He kept saying that he did not dare to do it. Gu Shengyin looked at everyone and nodded to the people behind her. "Let's go." Shirley also mounted his horse. He turned around to look at the mountain people behind him and the courtyard where he grew up. He thought for a moment and said loudly, "I still have a lot of food in my courtyard. Let's share it among ourselves. If I have the chance, I will come back to visit you." After he finished speaking, he turned his horse around and chased after the knights in front of him. There were no delays along the way. Every time they passed by a place, they would buy some food there. The rest of the time was spent hurrying along. Shirley had broadened his horizons along the way. He had never seen so many people in his life. Such a big and beautiful house, so many dazzling goods, such a lively market. The knights in the team were very friendly to him. Seeing him like this, they didn't mock him. Instead, they patiently explained to him what he didn't understand. He even patted him on the shoulder and laughed. "You think this kind of place is prosperous? When you reach our heavenly swamp capital, I'm afraid your eyes won't be able to see enough." Heavenly Swamp Capital City, where Al Wan grew up. Shirley smiled and said, "Then I'll have to take a good look." Along the way, Gu Shengyin did not show any special expression to Shirley. Now, this was the best. Someone who saved her life and was honest and dutiful. No one would be blind enough to dislike him or deal with him. However, if that person was deeply favored by Her Highness, and even won her heart, then Shirley's life would not be easy. Shirley was not stupid. He knew that Gu Shengyin was doing this for his own good. He also knew that his path was not easy. He wanted everyone to look at him seriously and think that he was worthy of all one. There was only one way. Become stronger. Chapter 1091. After 3 months, Emperor Tianzai, who finally received news of his daughter, personally welcomed Gu Shengyin and her entourage at the city gate. As a dignified emperor, in front of countless officials and commoners, he shed tears as he looked at his daughter who had been missing for months. Even Gu Shengyin's heart was filled with sorrow when she saw this. This emperor really loved his daughter from the bottom of his heart. Gu Shengyin also mentioned that when she was seriously injured and fell off the cliff, she was saved by Shirley. At this moment, the emperor was very grateful to the person who saved his daughter's life. After summoning Shirley to see him, he felt happy when he saw his handsome figure and resolute face. He immediately prepared to write an edict to bestow him with a noble title. However, Shirley stepped forward and bowed to the emperor. Your Highness is the daughter of the emperor and naturally has great fortune. Even without this commoner, Your Highness would have been able to turn danger into safety. It is this commoner's fortune to be able to save Your Highness' life by chance. I dare not claim credit for this. Gu Shengyin was very surprised. She didn't expect this big stone to become so eloquent in just a few days. The emperor seemed to be surprised that he could say such words. He looked at him carefully and saw that his eyes were sincere and didn't seem to be fake. His impression of him improved. He smiled and said, "But you saved my all-one. Even as a father, I have to thank you." Shirley said seriously, "This commoner is from the mountains and only has brute strength. If Your Highness doesn't mind, this commoner would like to join the army and contribute to Tianzai." At this time, Gu Shengyin's eyes lit up. She said to the emperor, "Father, I was just about to tell you that this Shirley doesn't just have brute strength. He was born with divine strength and infinite strength. I once saw him hunt with my own eyes and saw him lift a beast that weighed 500 to 600 kilograms. Oh." The emperor's eyes also lit up. Nowadays, the various countries were at war. If his country could have another fierce general, its strength would be greatly increased. It wasn't appropriate to stay at the city gate for too long. The emperor and his entourage rushed back to Tianzai Palace and specially set up a banquet for Gu Shengyin's return. Some of Tianzai Kingdom's loyal ministers also attended the banquet. After Gu Shengyin went back, she was hugged by the Empress of Tianzai and complained tearfully. During the banquet, the emperor suddenly mentioned Shirley's innate strength. "I wonder if warrior Shir is willing to show me his skills." Shirley stood up. "Of course." Thus, several guards worked together to carry something in. It was a cauldron. The emperor pointed at the cauldron. "This is the giant cauldron that the great ancestor ordered people to forge when our Tianzai dynasty was founded. It weighs 1,246 caddies. Usually, it requires 6 strong men to lift it. My son said that you have boundless strength. I wonder if you can lift it." Shirley glanced at the cauldron. He wasn't sure if he had the strength to do so. He could only cup his hands and say, "This commoner has never seen such a heavy thing before. I don't know if I can carry it, but I am willing to try." The emperor felt a sense of novelty in his heart. It had been a long time since someone spoke so frankly in front of him. He smiled and said, "Warrior Shir, just do your best. Don't force yourself." Shirley stood up and approached the cauldron. The entire palace hall suddenly quieted down. Let's not talk about the civil officials first. They clearly didn't believe that someone could lift such a heavy cauldron. Other than doubt, the generals were also a little excited. If this person really had innate strength, they must find a way to recruit him. Such a person, on the battlefield, was simply a human-shaped murder weapon. Chapter 1092. Among all the people, only Gu Shengyin has no doubt that Shirley can lift this giant cauldron. She was the only one who had seen Shirley grab the beast and throw it out like a plaything. The amount of energy needed to throw something and simply lift it up was on a completely different level. Not to mention that Shirley did not even blush or pant after throwing the beast. He did not feel tired at all. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Shirley calms his mind, opens his legs slightly, and firmly fastens them. His hands firmly grab the two legs of the giant cauldron. After a loud shout, the giant cauldron is actually lifted up by him. The people in the hall all widen their eyes. There are even many people who unconsciously stand up when the cauldron is lifted up. Gu Shengyin carefully looks at Shirley and finds that his face is a little red. But it seems that he is far from reaching his limit and does not look like he is forcing himself. Only then does she feel relieved. Shirley even lifts the cauldron and walks around the hall before putting it on the ground. When the cauldron is put on the ground, it does not make a big impact, indicating that Shirley still has the strength to put it down properly. Good. When the cauldron is put down, the emperor's face is overjoyed and says good. He personally pours 2 cups of wine and comes down from his seat in front of Shirley. Mr. Shi, Zhen salutes you. Shirley took the wine cup and drank it without hesitation. Seeing this, the emperor is even more delighted. At this time, a person dressed as a general stands up. Your Majesty, Mr. Shi is born with divine strength. This is a gift from the heavens to our Tianze. This subject boldly asks Your Majesty to allow Mr. Shi to be under my command. As soon as he finishes speaking, another person stands up and says that he just happens to lack such a vanguard under his command. Tianze's army is in the hands of the emperor, but every general has his own army. Therefore, they all want to recruit such a promising young man under their command. Gu Shengyin watched them fight with each other calmly. Want to snatch someone from her? You are still a little lacking. Sure enough, Shirley does not move. He quietly stands on the side and does not speak. The emperor leisurely drank a few cups of wine before he said with a smile, My beloved ministers, you're a little slow in taking action. What did His Majesty mean? The generals looked at each other. Could it be that someone else had known about Mr. Shi's innate strength before them? The emperor laughed heartily. Mailwan told me as soon as she came back that Mr. Shi must be her subordinate. The emperor was so biased that he would give Chu Failwan whatever she wanted. He even said that as long as she was willing, he could pass the throne to her. It was clear how much he doted on his daughter. The generals all looked at Gu Shengyin, who was sitting at the head of the table. When they saw her sitting there motionlessly, they suddenly realized why the princess was so calm today. It turned out that it had been prepared for a long time. Well, if the princess wanted someone, then it definitely had nothing to do with them. The generals are all shrewd people. They know exactly what the emperor is thinking. Not to mention that Gu Shengyin told the emperor in advance. Even if the emperor did not mention it, as long as she wanted it, she would have to say it first. At this point, Shirley's ownership is settled. Until now, Shirley's tightly clenched fists relaxed a little. Chapter 1093. After they left the palace, Gu Shengyin led him onto the horse. Let's go, I'll show you my military camp. They didn't walk fast. Shirley, you've seen today how much Imperial Father dotes on me. Gu Shengyin looked at him. I'm not saying this to show off. I just want to tell you that it won't be easy for you to marry me. Shirley tilted his head and looked at her attentively with a unique gentleness. I know. So? Shirley's tone was firm. So I won't give up. Wan, you have to wait for me. Gu Shengyin smiled. Okay, I'll wait for you. She had waited for 5 years when she said, wait. In these 5 years, she ignored the marriage proposals of countless princes and princes. She rejected her father and mother's suggestions and waited wholeheartedly for that man to grow up. Tianzi country had a fierce general. When he first showed his talent, he was just a small soldier. But that soldier killed thousands of people in a battle between Tianzi country and Yinzi country and captured the enemy's leader alive. Then, he went from an ordinary soldier to a protector, to a deputy general, to a commander, to a general, to a general, to a general, to a general. He used the blood of his enemies and his own achievements to reach a point where no one could ignore him. Speaking of Heavenly Lake's military generals, the first people that came to mind were two people. Chu Failwan, the princess of Tianzi country who had never lost a battle despite being a woman. Together with her subordinate, Shirlei, who was known as the great general of the Heavenly Grace Army, who was known to be able to kill 10,000 people on the battlefield, whose strength could carry a cauldron and whose bravery was unparalleled in the world. Actually, with Shirlei's current rank, he could have led an army alone. But he had always been under Gu Xingyin's command. Everyone praised him for being grateful and said that he was grateful to the princess for recognizing his worth. Only he knew that he stayed here because he wanted to be closer to her. When the autumn leaves of Tianzi country all fell, the emperor of Tianzi country welcomed his 50th birthday. At this time, Shirlei was still on the battlefield. During the banquet, while the wine was being drunk, an urgent report came from the entrance of the palace. Reporting to your majesty, the general of the army has returned to the court. He has attached the document of Yunza's surrender to congratulate your majesty on your birthday. As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. Are you serious? The emperor was overjoyed and sobered up. He couldn't help but stand up from his seat. It's absolutely true. The great general of the army rushed back to the imperial court, especially on the occasion of His Majesty's birthday. The army is still in Yunzhou. The wine glass in Gu Xingyin's hand trembled. The wine spilled out and soaked her sleeve before disappearing without a trace. This man had rushed here from the cloud state. Did he have to risk his life like this? Quick, 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 come with me to welcome the great general. The emperor was overjoyed and actually got up to go out personally. Gu Xingyin hurriedly got up and stopped him. Father, it is enough for me to go and greet General Shi. If you go personally, I am afraid he will be uneasy. The emperor was too happy at first. Now that he had calmed down, he also felt that this was inappropriate. When he heard Gu Xingyin take the initiative to step forward, he nodded. Then go and greet the meritorious official of Tianzi on behalf of father. Yes, your majesty. Gu Xingyin's footsteps were a little hurried. The eunuch behind her thought that it was because the princess was happy, so he didn't find it strange. But she didn't know. The princess was indeed happy, but it wasn't because Yunza had surrendered. It was because that man had finally returned. Chapter 1094. A black figure came into Gu Xingyin's sight from afar. He was wearing a thick black cloak, and his face looked haggard. His face seemed to be thinner, and his skin was darker. His eyes were colder. His aura was more frightening. This was the evil spirit accumulated from human blood in a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Even Gu Xingyin saw that the guards standing beside Shirlei were sweating profusely on such a cold day. Of course, it was not because of the heat. In fact, even Gu Xingyin's first impulse when he saw him was to draw his sword. Their eyes met. The two of them looked at each other quietly, without any extra movements. They all understood the meaning in their eyes. Gu Xingyin spoke first. General Shi, I am here to welcome you back under the orders of my father. Shirlei bowed in the direction of the main hall, and then he bowed to Gu Xingyin. Thank you, your highness. The eunuchs beside them did not dare to say anything. They could not express their feelings. They only felt that when the two of them were together, the atmosphere was so tense that no one dared to disturb them. When the two of them left, the guards at the gate of the palace sighed in relief. They finally left. You didn't see that when General Shi was standing here, my hand never left the long sword at my waist. Brother, you are amazing. You even wanted to draw your sword. I almost fell to the ground. The two guards were discussing in a low voice. They looked at each other and their eyes were filled with shock. It was too scary. He could do this with just one look. Gu Xingyin and Shirlei walked side by side. The two of them were very close to each other. In the eyes of outsiders, General Shi was the princess's trusted aide, so it was normal for them to have a good relationship. There was nothing wrong with it. Only the two of them knew that under the cover of their sleeves, their hands were tightly clasped together. Shirlei held her hand tightly, but he did not dare to use too much strength. It was as if he had placed all his attention on the hand that was holding the other person's. Later, when he presented his achievements, what awaited him would be countless praises and rewards. But to Shirley right now, none of that mattered anymore. He only wanted to make this road a little longer, a little longer. It was best to let him continue walking with her like this. But no matter how long the road was, there would always be an end. Even if they were holding hands, they would still have to part. Gu Shengyin released his hand and the two of them walked into the main hall. Shirley bowed deeply to the emperor. Maintaining a half-kneeling posture, he raised the document in his hand. It was the Cloud Swamp Country's emperor surrender document. The emperor personally got off the main seat and pulled him up. Then, he read the letter word by word. Good, good, good. He laughed loudly as he looked at Shirley. Almost without hesitation, he conferred the title of Marquis of 10,000 households. Shirley knelt down at this moment. I don't ask for a marquis, nor do I ask for a reward of 1,000 gold coins. I only ask for your majesty to promise me one thing. The emperor was in a good mood and asked, what is the matter? Shirley lowered his head and said the words that he had hidden in his heart for 5 years. I ask your majesty to marry Princess Feilwan to me. The main hall fell into silence. The emperor's expression froze for a moment. Gu Shengyin held the wine cup in her hand. Even her usually calm state of mind showed a trace of nervousness. The emperor looked down at the man in front of him. This man was resolute and strong. Now, he had the best military achievements in the world. It was not bad for such a man to be his Luan's son-in-law. Chapter 1095. However, the emperor glanced at his expressionless daughter and felt a little troubled. Over the past few years, there had been quite a few men who had asked for Alwan's hand in marriage. However, no matter who it was, Alwan would always reply with 2 words, not marrying. Although it was true that the emperor's daughter didn't have to worry about marriage, which parent didn't worry about their children's marriage? If it was someone else, the emperor wouldn't have to be so conflicted. He would just issue an edict and the girl would have to marry him whether she wanted to or not. However, this stubborn girl was his favorite daughter. The emperor could even ignore the objections of all the courtiers and send her to the battlefield. Why would he let his daughter suffer because of a marriage? Hence, the emperor didn't agree on the spot. Instead, he turned to look at Gu Shengyin. The courtiers also lowered their heads and focused their attention on Gu Shengyin. Some of them were thinking, why doesn't General Shi take this opportunity to earn a title? With his military achievements, he would definitely have a bright future. Why would he have to worry about not having a beautiful wife? Princess Feilwan was beautiful, but she was too stubborn. A woman like her might not be a good wife. Most importantly, this princess had already rejected countless marriage proposals. If General Shi were to be rejected again this time, as a man, it would not look good for him. Gu Shengyin didn't move under everyone's gaze. She remained silent for a long time before saying, everything will be decided by father. See, it was indeed a rejection, wait. Many people took a moment to react. What did Princess Feilwan just say? Everything will be decided by father. In other words, the girl was too embarrassed to agree on the spot, so she pushed the blame onto her father. The emperor was also a little confused. However, he couldn't help but smile after recovering. Did Alwan just agree? He looked at his daughter. She didn't have much of an expression on her face. It was as if the decision she just made wasn't something that would decide her life. Looking at the courtiers, the emperor felt a sense of belonging when he saw their shocked expressions. That's right, this reaction is normal. He coughed softly and looked at Shirley, who was still kneeling on the ground. The emperor's gaze unconsciously softened. Yes, previously, Shirley was a subject that he thought highly of. Now, he was looking at him as a son-in-law. General Shi, you may rise, the emperor said to Shirley. Alwan is my most beloved daughter. General Shi, please take care of her in the future. With that, the matter was settled. Shirley tried his best to conceal the ecstasy in his eyes. He cupped his hands and said, please rest assured, Your Majesty. When he returned to his seat, his colleagues around him looked at him differently. Before this, in their eyes, General Shi was a junior with a boundless future. With his military achievements, it was even possible for him to become one of the 3 ministers in the future. But now, it wasn't just a possibility. It was a sure thing. He was about to become Princess Fei Luan's son-in-law. Everyone knew how much the emperor doted on Princess Fei Luan. If she was a man, she would have been the heir to the throne a long time ago. For the sake of Princess Fei Luan's reputation, even if General Shi was a good-for-nothing, the emperor would still promote him. Not to mention, not only was he not a good-for-nothing, he was also a 1-in-a-million talent. Chapter 1096. As soon as Shi returned to his residence, a decree came from the palace. 2 decrees came one after another. The first decree conferred him the title of Duke Xingua and gave him a mansion of the same grade as well as countless gold, silver, and treasures. The second decree was for Duke Xingua Shi and Princess Fei Luan to marry each other. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Shi kowtowed. He had never been so sincere before. The eunuch who delivered the decree saw his forehead turn red. He sighed in his heart that Duke Xingua was an honest man. Other people just needed to put on an act to show their gratitude. But he didn't know how long Shi had waited for this day and how long he had endured it. Chu Fei Luan was not young anymore. The emperor and empress were very anxious. It was rare for her to agree to the marriage herself. The next day, the emperor found someone from the imperial astronomer to calculate the date and pick the nearest auspicious day. Even if it was the nearest, it would be 2 months later. The princesses of this dynasty usually started preparing for their weddings half a year in advance. They had never been so anxious. If it was any other princess, people would say that she was not favored and the dowry would be overstated. But no one dared to think that it was Gu Xingyin. Anyway, this Princess Fei Luan was never a person who played by the rules. In the palace, the emperor and empress kept a close eye on everything that was sent to Princess Fei Luan. The empress had to check everything carefully. There was also the emperor, who had ordered his men to open up his own treasury. He wanted nothing more than to empty out the entire treasury and use it to supplement his daughter. Her husband, who had served her for dozens of years, was speechless. From the looks of it, those who didn't know better would think that Princess Fei Luan was going to get married to some desolate place, as if they would never see her again in this life. "My Majesty, Princess Fei Luan is in the capital." Anyway, the servants didn't dare to be careless with the empress' attitude. They prepared everything to the best of their ability. 2 months later. 10 miles of red dowry. From the palace gate to the princess residence. Shi sat on a tall horse and looked at the red makeup in his eyes. He actually had a surreal feeling in his heart. 5 years ago, he met that fairy-like beautiful woman and followed her out of the mountains. At the very beginning, all he wanted was to stay by her side. Until now, he could finally take her under his wing in a justifiable manner. Duke Xingua's manner. Everyone could tell that the Marquis was in a good mood today. There was a slight smile on his handsome face, and even the aura around him became gentler. That's right, there are 3 joyous events in life: the wedding night. Especially when the bride was such a beauty. Which man wouldn't be happy? There were a few men who had been rejected by Gu Xingyin who were jealous and secretly planned to get this lucky guy drunk. Shi pretended not to know anything and did not reject anyone. In the end, the Marquis of Country guarding Marquis flew away, and the ground was littered with people. Many of Shi's subordinates who had fought alongside him looked at those young masters with disdain. Master Ho could drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk. How could he drink with these gigolos? You want to defeat me too? He was simply overestimating himself. Actually, Shi was a little drunk. But he didn't know if it was the wine or the red sky that was intoxicating. She was waiting for him in the room. He walked steadily towards the bridal chamber. Chapter 1097. Mandarin duck's brocade quilt, dragons, phoenixes, red candles, and a happy beauty. The matron of honor was waiting in the bridal chamber for the couple to complete the last rites. What Shi wanted to do most now was to be alone with Ah Luan, without anyone disturbing them. But those rites couldn't be left out. This was his and Ah Luan's wedding, so of course everything had to be done perfectly. The moment the bride's veil was lifted, the room was filled with light. They ate raw glutinous rice balls, drank cross-cupped wine, and tied the knot without any hesitation. Finally, all the extra people left. In their world, there was only each other left. Shirley could no longer suppress the excitement in his heart. His hands trembled slightly as he caressed Gu Xingyin's face. "All one." Gu Xingyin looked at him and smiled, softly replying, "Yes. You are mine." In the end, there was a trace of uncertainty. Gu Xingyin held his leaving hand and smiled like a flower. "I am yours." The hibiscus curtain was warm, a night of spring. Historical records: Tianzi country's Qingyuan king, Chu Failwan, fell off a cliff at the age of 20 and met the country guarding Marquis, Shirley. They were comrades for 5 years, and after that, they were husband and wife for 40 years. The two had a son and 2 daughters and were very close. The Qingyuan king's old injury flared up and he died in the backyard. In less than a month, the country guarding Marquis, who had always been healthy, fell ill and died. Shirley lay on the bed, unable to speak. He felt the strength in his body gradually leaving him. There was a noise in his ears. He could tell that it was his and Al Wan's daughter crying. What is she crying for? He thought. He had lived enough in this life. He had too many things that others could not even dream of. It could be said that he had everything a man wanted. Now, his grandchildren had all grown up, and there was no one in the Marquis residence that he cared about. His Ulwan had been gone for a month. He could not let her wait for too long. The bridge of helplessness was not easy to cross, and she would not be happy if she was alone. Gradually, his ears couldn't hear anything clearly. His eyes opened in vain, but the Fusho double-patterned bed curtain in his line of sight was still getting more and more blurry. There was a glimmer of light in the darkness. That woman, who was still as beautiful as ever, was wearing a snow-white cloak. She turned her head to look at him and complained unhappily, "Why did you come so late?" "I've been waiting for a long time." He smiled. "I'm coming." The people around only saw the thin old man on the bed reveal a faint smile and murmur, "Ulwan, I'm here." He wasn't breathing. The middle-aged woman who had been holding back her tears finally burst into tears. The country guarding Marquis, Shirley, passed away at the age of 72. Gu Xingyin stayed in the space, watching the scene after his death. There was silence for a long time. The system came out to comfort her. "Host, please don't be sad. These are all illusions." "Illusory?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. If these were all illusions, then what was he? Then what was he? Then what was the world that she had experienced with him? "No, to me, these are the most real experiences," she said softly. Her eyes were a little sore, but she did not cry. This was far from the end. They still had countless chances to start over. "System, let's go to the next world." "Yes, host, beginning world transfer." "Host, please prepare." Gu Xingyin closed her eyes and began a new journey. Chapter 1098. There was a girl named Zhong Zhanghuan. Her family was rich and her mother died early. Her father was busy with his career and neglected to discipline her. When she was 16, she became a top student in a private high school. She was rebellious and had poor grades, but had an extraordinary sensitivity to fashion. She would spend the 3 years between the ages of 16 and 19 fooling around. Then, on the night she turned 19, she suddenly had an epiphany. Not only did she bury the hatchet with her father, but she also designed a blueprint herself and submitted it to an internationally renowned designer. Then she was recommended by the designer to a world-renowned design school and became the apprentice of the chief design director of a well-known international luxury brand. Then, while still in school, her design talent began to show and she was recognized by major fashion weeks one after another. Less than 2 years after she finished her apprenticeship, she became famous and stood at the top of the fashion industry. She was called the Hand of God. And her rebellious period when she was young was kindly understood by her fans. Geniuses always had some characteristics that were different from ordinary people. However, at a certain point in time, Zhong Zhanghuan's life was quietly turned around by a person. She was the class monitor in high school. They didn't see eye to eye. Class monitor Chang Ru. Chang Ru and Zhong Zhanghuan were obviously two different types of people. Chang Ru was beautiful, good at her studies, generous and cheerful. Whether it was among the teachers or among the students, she was very popular. Zhong Zhanghuan was arrogant and liked to cause trouble. In the eyes of the teachers, she was the kind of person who couldn't be approached. Zhong Zhanghuan once passed by the school and happened to meet Chang Ru, who was being blackmailed by some gangsters. She was in a good mood that day and stood up for Chang Ru. It wasn't a big deal. But Zhong Zhanghuan didn't know that Chang Ru liked the same sex. Moreover, a teenage girl was actually moved by a hero saving a damsel in distress. Chang Ru's attitude towards Zhong Zhanghuan changed 180 degrees. She cared about her studies and spoke good words for her among the students. When she was free, she offered to make up lessons with her and even said to the teacher that she wanted to be Zhong Zhanghuan's desk mate. But Zhong Zhanghuan was annoyed by her. She really couldn't understand what the class monitor was thinking. Was this a new way to torture her? Zhong Zhanghuan admitted that if this was really Chang Ru's scheme, then she had won. This was because Zhong Zhanghuan's life had indeed been ruined by Chang Ru. She appeared in all the places in her life where she could appear and had a hand in everything. At the age of 18, during the second semester of the second year of high school, Zhong Zhanghuan fell in love with a sports student from the school next door. In fact, Zhong Zhanghuan didn't have a good impression of that guy, but as a delinquent girl, she had never been in a relationship at a young age. How embarrassing would it be if word got out? Then, Zhong Zhanghuan felt miserable. Because, on their first date, they were caught red-handed by their homeroom teacher. Then, she wrote a self-reflection letter and called her parents. Zhong Zhanghuan was severely beaten by her father. The next day at school, Zhong Zhanghuan asked Chang Ru directly if she was the one who told on him. Chang Ru admitted to it. Zhong Zhanghuan was so angry at that time. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't hit women, he would have beaten Chang Ru to death. This was not the end. What Zhong Zhanghuan couldn't stand the most was the fact that Chang Ru had tricked her. Chapter 1099. During the third year of high school, Zhong Zhanghuan came to her senses and finally started to study hard. She was smart to begin with. After cramming for half a semester, her grades were actually pretty good. Although her grades weren't enough to get her into a top university in the country, it was enough to go overseas. She heard that a designer she admired happened to be in Z country with his team. She spent 3 days and 3 nights drawing a design that she was most satisfied with. This was the work that she could have used to be recommended to the design academy. However, she didn't try to hide it, so Chang Ru naturally saw it. When Chang Ru asked what it was, Zhong Zhanghuan couldn't stand her repeated questioning and finally told him. When Chang Ru heard that she was going overseas, he didn't disturb her for the entire day. Zhong Zhanghuan was free. However, she didn't know that when she thought that Chang Ru wouldn't disturb her anymore, he did something even worse. At noon, she specially bought an envelope and carefully placed her design into it. After confirming the address, she prepared to send it to the designer after lunch. Chang Ru watched her put the item into the drawer of the desk. When no one was around, she switched the item inside. Naturally, it was impossible to receive any reply from a blank piece of paper. The designer even thought that she was trying to prank him. He was so angry that he blacklisted her contact information. Zhong Zhanghuan didn't know that the design she had put in so much effort into didn't reach the designer's hands. She thought that it was because the designer didn't like her work, so there was no result. After such a blow, she lost her passion for design. After graduating from high school, she went to a second-tier university. Under Chang Ru's intentions, her school was right next to Zhong Zhanghuan's. However, one was a national key university, while the other was an ordinary university. Chang Ru, who was in university, still liked to pester Zhong Zhanghuan. Over time, no matter how slow Zhong Zhanghuan was, she realized that something was wrong with Changru. Under her probing and secret observation, she finally found something that she couldn't accept. Changru might like her. Thunder from a clear sky. Zhong Zhanghuan had a fiery temper. After discovering it, she directly told Changru. She said that she couldn't accept this kind of thing and asked Changru not to approach her again. Otherwise, she would call the police. At that time, Changru was slightly depressed because of the years of suppression. His secret love for many years had been rudely rejected, so he couldn't figure it out. She pushed Zhong Zhanghuan off the rooftop. Then, he jumped down as well. Gu Xingyin accepted the plot expressionlessly. So, this is what it means to hate when you can't love someone, and in the end, you cause the deaths of others and yourself? From Gu Xingyin's point of view, Changru's so-called love couldn't even be called love. In the name of love, she interfered with other people's lives and ruined their future. This wasn't love. This was selfishness. She straightened up from the desk she was lying on. That's right, on the desk. It was Zhong Zhanghuan's first year of high school. At this time, Zhong Zhanghuan was still a straight-A student with dyed hair and a row of earrings. The worst thing was that she had just saved the damsel in distress the day before yesterday. Zhanghuan, I knew you hadn't eaten. Here, I brought something for you. Changru walked into the classroom, and his eyes lit up when he saw Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin sighed inwardly. Chapter 1100. Placed on her desk was a cup of hot milk tea and a paper bag of jianbing. A tempting aroma wafted from the desk into Gu Xingyin's nose. Her stomach, which hadn't eaten lunch, rumbled. Normally, Zhong Zhanghuan would probably turn his face away and pretend he didn't see it. At this moment, the classmates sitting in front of her turned around and said enviously, Changru, you brought lunch again. Changru smiled and didn't say anything. Gu Xingyin could tell from the students' eyes that he did not think highly of him. Indeed, from their point of view, Changru saw that she hadn't eaten and specially brought her lunch. However, she didn't care about it and let it cool down every time. Then, Changru would silently throw it into the trash can after school. No matter how she looked at it, it was her fault. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. The jianbing was very fragrant and she was very hungry. Moreover, she needed to turn the situation around. She reached into her trouser pocket and took out $100 bill and placed it in front of Changru. Changru's expression changed. That's not what I meant. Gu Xingyin said, I know you're helping your classmate out of kindness, but there's no reason for the class monitor to spend money for nothing. Take this $100 bill as the money you'll pay for lunch for the next 2 days. If you don't want it, I won't be able to eat lunch. It was just before lunch break. Many of the students in the class had already finished eating and returned to the classroom. Gu Xingyin didn't lower her voice when she spoke. Everyone in the class heard what she said. In all fairness, there was nothing wrong with what she said. Gu Xingyin and Changru were just ordinary classmates. There was no reason for her to spend money. However, Gu Xingyin's words made it seem like they were helping each other out. The intimacy that Changru had wanted to connect the two of them instantly disappeared without a trace. Moreover, Changru had to accept the money. Gu Xingyin said, Class monitor, you can't be so generous. Right now, I'm the only one in our class who doesn't eat. If one day no one eats, won't your living expenses be gone in a day? Changru choked. She couldn't possibly say that he was different from them and that he was special, right? She had no choice but to take the money with a reluctant look on her face. Only then did Gu Xingyin take the still steaming Chinese crepe on the table and eat it in big bites. It smelled so good. At this time, her desk mate was not Changru, but a quiet girl with glasses. As she ate, Gu Xingyin thought about how to solve Changru's problem. He had to think of a way to make her give up on him. Gu Xingyin looked out of the window casually while eating. A figure caught her attention. He was tall and slender, and Gu Xingyin could tell from his back alone that he was quite good-looking. Actually, she didn't need to look at him to know that he wasn't bad-looking. This man, has he ever looked different in any world? Lin Zhe. Someone shouted from outside. Then, the boy turned his head over. Ah! Gu Xingyin heard a soft exclamation from her deskmate. She turned around and saw her quiet deskmate covering her face with her hands and looking at the boy outside with blushing cheeks. Sensing Gu Xingyin's gaze, the girl lowered her head in embarrassment. Gu Xingyin didn't think there was anything wrong with her reaction. It was normal for girls to like handsome guys. Moreover, this handsome guy was the trump card of all handsome guys. Chapter 1101. Gu Xingyin looked at the handsome guy outside the window and thought of something. She was staring at the handsome guy outside without blinking. The guy seemed to have sensed something and turned his gaze to her side. Their eyes met. Gu Xingyin smiled brightly and walked over. She waited for him to respond. In the end, he just glanced at her face expressionlessly, as if he didn't see anything. Then, he lightly retracted his gaze. Gu Xingyin. Very good, he has character. The boy's figure left, and Gu Xingyin also received his information. Lin Zhe, a high school freshman, class 3 student. In this year's freshman entrance ceremony, with his perfect 1.85 meters figure and impeccable facial features, there was no doubt that he ascended to the throne of the school's most handsome boy. In this world where beauty was justice, it was easy for good-looking people to be accepted for anything they did. For example, although Lin Zhe was very handsome, his character was really unflattering. He was like a human-shaped iceberg, expressionless all day long, as if the whole world owed him something. But this kind of character was definitely not a problem in the eyes of these teenage girls. This was character. This was cool. Gu Xingyin looked away and turned back. She immediately met Chang Ru's eyes. It seemed very gentle. She frowned slightly. Actually, Chang Ru's behavior was very obvious. If she had done this to a man and a woman, no one would have suspected what she was thinking. It was because this kind of thing was too unbelievable that the people around her couldn't relate it to love. Gu Xingyin looked away as if she didn't see anything. She wanted Chang Ru to completely give up on her. After school in the afternoon, Gu Xingyin ignored the math teacher's murderous gaze and deliberately left the classroom 10 minutes early. She walked to the door of Class 3's classroom and waited for them to finish school. The sun was very strong and Gu Xingyin couldn't help but close her eyes. When Lin Zhe turned his head, he saw the girl leaning against the railing outside the classroom. She was wearing exaggerated clothes that were obviously not suitable for the school style. Her hair was also different from the hair of high school girls, which was long and straight. A string of shiny earrings hung from her ears. Lin Zhe felt that it was very strange. Logically speaking, he didn't like such exaggerated dressing. Moreover, most people wouldn't feel that it was cool when they put it together like that. Instead, it would feel that it was very tacky. But when it came to this girl, it didn't make people feel that way. She was cool. This was what Lin Zhe thought. This was the difference brought about by aesthetics. Although Zhong Zhanghuan was in her rebellious phase and liked to be independent, her natural sensitivity to fashion prevented her from messing up her image. However, Lin Zhe's admiration was limited to this. It had nothing to do with him. He retracted his gaze. School was about to end. There was no such thing as procrastination in this school, so when the bell rang, the teacher stopped teaching and the students began to pack their things. Gu Xingyin watched the teacher leave. Lin Zhe also packed his things and was about to get up. At this time, she entered Class 3's classroom. The students in Class 3 looked at her curiously. A few of them seemed to recognize her and whispered to each other. Gu Xingyin walked straight to Lin Zhe's desk. Chapter 1102. Feeling that he was suddenly blocked by a shadow, Lin Zhe raised his head. It was the girl who had been standing outside the classroom. What's the matter? He frowned and looked at Gu Xingyin. The strange combination of the two was undoubtedly very easy to arouse people's interest. The students who were tidying up their things all slowed down their movements. They pricked up their ears and paid attention to the movements here. Gu Xingyin bent down and supported herself with one hand on the desk, enveloping Lin Zhe in her shadow. This posture made Lin Zhe couldn't help but frown. Gu Xingyin's mouth raised into a cynical smile little by little. Lin Zhe, let me introduce myself. My name is Zhong Zhanghuan. Zhong as in love at first sight, Zhanghuan as in happiness. Lin Zhe's eyebrows didn't even move when he heard this. He just said lightly, I see. Can you please leave my desk? Gu Xingyin's smile didn't change, and she even moved closer. No, the self-introduction just now was just the foreplay. The main point is later. Lin Zhe, I fell in love with you at first sight. Can you go out with me? The whole classroom was silent. Lin Zhe's eyebrows could be piled up into a small mountain. He looked at the girl in front of him with some confusion. She just happened to be looking at him calmly, as if she didn't feel that she had just done anything shocking. He suddenly stood up. This action made Gu Xingyin have to let go of his hand on the desk. The aura that had just been created with great difficulty was instantly destroyed. Lin Zhe was taller than Gu Xingyin and more than half of his head was injured. He lowered his head and looked down at Gu Xingyin. I'm sorry, classmate. I don't have any thoughts about you, and I refuse your request to go out with you. After he finished speaking, he didn't hesitate to put his bag on his shoulder with one hand and turn to leave. Gu Xingyin half leaned on his desk with a faint smile and didn't chase after him. Sure enough, he had the same personality as the rumors said. However, she wouldn't give up so easily. There was still a long way to go. Gu Xingyin went home. It was rare for her to return home so early. Zhong Zhiping, who had just returned home from work, was surprised to see his daughter sitting on the sofa. If this made him feel surprised, the next moment, his daughter raised her head and called him father, which almost made this man, who was a man of his word in the business world, cry. How long has it been? Ever since the rebellious phase of puberty, this child had an inexplicable hostility towards him. Every time, he would play with someone until the middle of the night before returning home, causing his grades to plummet. When he saw him at home, he would frown and look at him coldly. At most, he would call him Dad coldly. He was, after all, a man who had experienced great battles. He was able to return to his normal state in a short period of time. She smiled and replied, You're home so early today? Zhong Zhanghuan looked at the man in front of him. He was wearing a well-ironed suit and his hair was carefully combed. He looked like a handsome middle-aged man. Calculating his age, Zhong Zhiping was less than 40 years old, but there were already traces of white hair on his temples. Thinking about the plot, during the 3 years when Zhong Zhanghuan was rebellious, the relationship between father and daughter fell to a freezing point. Zhong Zhanghuan didn't know that her father was secretly worried about her. Gu Xingyin didn't have parents, but she knew that in the human world, the most selfless love was often given to their children by parents. If possible, she didn't want to let down any parent's deep affection. Chapter 1103. The father and daughter had a long and thorough conversation. In Gu Xingyin's opinion, there was no unsolvable knot between the father and daughter. Why did they come to this point? It was nothing more than one who always liked to keep things in her heart, and the other who was too busy with his career to discipline her. When the estrangement arose and Zhong Zhiping wanted to save it, Zhong Zhanghuan didn't want him to get close to her world. But for Gu Xingyin, she was willing to give her father such a chance. Zhong Zhiping also understood his daughter's innermost thoughts and plans for the future. He was an open-minded father. When he heard that his daughter wanted to study design and go abroad, he didn't object much. Until Gu Xingyin told her that she had fallen in love with a boy. What did you say? Zhong Zhiping directly raised his voice by 2 degrees. Gu Xingyin calmly repeated her words. It was not that she wanted to provoke her father, but she had just confessed in such a high-profile way this afternoon. It was estimated that the school couldn't hide it. If her parents were called, the consequences would be more serious. It was better for him to confess in the beginning. Zhong Zhiping's reaction was expected. No father could accept his 16-year-old daughter's puppy love. But when he knew that his daughter was still in the stage of unrequited love and her confession was rejected, he was angry again. Who is this brat? How dare he look down on our Huanhuan? In Zhong Zhiping's eyes, it was one thing for him to not allow his daughter to have puppy love, but it was another thing for others to look down on his daughter. No matter in the eyes of parents, their children were always the best. Gu Xingyin struck while the iron was hot. So Dad, he doesn't like me, right? I will work harder to pursue him and let him fall in love with me to prove my charm as a daughter. Hearing her words, Zhong Zhiping raised his eyebrows. Do you think I am a fool? It was such an obvious provocation. Did she think that he couldn't hear it? Gu Xingyin smiled. But I can't help it. I know it is wrong to have puppy love, but I can't help it. I like him. She stared at Zhong Zhiping with her eyes wide open. Don't only allow the officials to set fires, but not the common people. Don't think I don't know that you told my mom that you were high school classmates. Zhong Zhiping looked at her in surprise. How did you know? Gu Xingyin smiled proudly. Of course, my mother secretly told me when I was young. Of course, it was the almighty system that told her this. Hearing his daughter mention his late wife, Zhong Zhiping fell into a rare silence. He had a very good relationship with his wife. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed single for so many years after his wife had passed away. With his qualifications, there were plenty of people who wanted to follow him. There were young and beautiful girls of similar age and experience. But he couldn't forget his wife, and he didn't want to upset his only daughter. Gu Xingyin looked at him and said sorry in her heart. In order to achieve her goal, she even brought up the mother of this body. But looking at his father's expression, there should be a chance. Sure enough, when Zhong Zhiping came back to his senses, he saw his daughter sitting beside him and looking at him. He thought of the beautiful memories he had with his wife when he was young and couldn't bear to refuse her. He sighed. Dad only has a few requirements. At the end of the term, your grades will improve. Don't let this matter occupy too much of your life. You are still young, and there are many wonderful things in life. Also, you have to protect yourself. Chapter 1104. After settling her father, Gu Xingyin went to school the next day without any pressure. The next day, when she came to the classroom, as expected, all the students in the class intentionally or unintentionally looked at her. She ignored these gazes and sat down. Just as she took out her book, she saw her deskmate looking at her hesitantly. Gu Xingyin had a good impression of this deskmate. This girl's personality was the same as her appearance. They were both quite quiet. Although the two of them didn't talk much, their relationship wasn't bad. Most importantly, this girl wasn't like some people who avoided Zhong Zhanghuan as if he was a demon or a ghost. She put the book on the desk and turned to look at her. If you have something to say, just say it. Her deskmate was shocked. Usually, Zhong Zhanghuan wouldn't pay attention to her at all. But she still asked honestly in a small voice, I heard that you confessed to Lindsay yesterday? She knew it was about this. Gu Xingyin didn't intend to hide it and nodded. Yes, I fell in love with him at first sight. The girl's eyes widened. She didn't expect her to say it so naturally. Under normal circumstances, when a girl was asked such a question, shouldn't she lower her head shyly and not say anything? However, she silently imagined Gu Xingyin lowering her head shyly and shivered. That scene seemed a little too beautiful. This kind of style was more suitable for her. She thought for a moment and looked at Gu Xingyin worriedly. You don't think too much. I heard that Lindsay's personality is like that. Many girls were rejected when they said goodbye to him. Was she comforting herself? Gu Xingyin's gaze warmed a little and she smiled at her deskmate. Thank you for your concern. I don't mind. Seeing that she didn't seem to have suffered any blow, her deskmate was relieved. But Gu Xingyin's next sentence made her widen her eyes again. What's the big deal about rejecting him once? You just wait and see. I'll get him one day. Gu Xingyin said confidently. Her deskmate looked at her in surprise. So she didn't plan to give up at all? Gu Xingyin was dressed much more normally today. Her hair was combed neatly, which was rare for her. She wore high-waisted denim jeans, a white-laced shirt, and 3 shiny silver earrings on her left ear. After taking a few more glances, the girl couldn't help but blush. Why didn't she realize that her deskmate was so handsome? When Gu Xingyin saw her expression, he understood what she was thinking. A mischievous idea arose in her heart. She quietly leaned over and asked, "What's wrong? You're blushing when you see me. Are you attracted by my handsomeness?" She deliberately lowered her voice when she said this, and the girl's face immediately turned red. However, she was an honest person and actually nodded with a red face. It was the first time she saw her deskmate dressed so simply and neatly. She was indeed a little stunned. Ha 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 ha. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but laugh. How could someone be so obedient? The students in the class all turned their heads to look at the two of them, curious about what had happened between the two of them. 2 rows away, Chang Ru looked over, his hands tightly gripping his sleeves. Why? She could whisper intimately with that girl without any scruples and laugh out loud, but she didn't even look at him nicely. Chapter 1105. After the morning self-study session, Gu Xingyin sat lazily in her seat without moving. Chang Ru walked over to her seat and said to Gu Xingyin's deskmate, "Cici, can you give us some space? I have something to talk to Zhang Huan about." Gu Xingyin's deskmate, Cici, knew that the two of them didn't get along. Although their relationship seemed to be improving, she was still a little worried. However, she had always been a soft person. At most, she glanced at Gu Xingyin worriedly before standing up obediently and leaving. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and looked at Chang Ru. "Class rep, do you have any instructions for me?" Chang Ru looked at her face, which had instantly turned cold, and her tone was completely businesslike. Anger rose in her heart. She was clearly chatting and laughing with others just a moment ago. Why did she become like this the moment she arrived? Why didn't she think about her relationship with Zhong Zhanghuan in the past? She had inexplicably changed her opinion of Zhong Zhanghuan, but to Zhong Zhanghuan, Chang Ru was still the same Chang Ru he used to dislike. Suppose someone who was always at odds with you suddenly changed their temper and treated you well. What would a normal person's reaction be? Most people's first reaction would probably be that there was a conspiracy. But Chang Ru took it for granted, or rather, she was too self-centered. She was very popular and almost everyone liked her. So she naturally thought that since she liked Zhong Zhanghuan and treated her so well, it was only natural that Zhong Zhanghuan would like her back. But Zhong Zhanghuan didn't improve their relationship like she wanted, so she felt extremely wronged. So, Chang Ru impulsively blurted out, "Zhong Zhanghuan, do you hate me?" Gu Xingyin seemed to be very surprised as he looked at her and asked in confusion, "Class rep, isn't it obvious that I hate you? I thought the whole class knew that we hated each other." Chang Ru's face turned pale when she heard Gu Xingyin's blunt answer. The environment she grew up in and the education she received since she was a child had taught her to hold back when she spoke. This was the first time she had seen someone as impolite as Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, felt refreshed. The original owner had a domineering and flamboyant personality. It was simply too awesome. When speaking to a cold person like Chang Ru, one had to be simple and crude in order to be effective. Chang Ru seemed to have been dealt a huge blow by Gu Xingyin's words. Her voice trembled as she asked, "I thought we could be friends." Gu Xingyin shuddered at his resentful tone. She resisted the urge and said, "Don't. I have not the slightest interest in being your friend. Class rep, if you really want what's best for me, let's go our separate ways in the future. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. That's for the best." Chang Ru ran out crying. Gu Xingyin, did she say something outrageous? His deskmate, Cici, walked over cautiously. She had been standing to the side, so she didn't hear what the two of them said. She only heard her deskmate say a few words, and then the class rep ran out crying. Did I say something outrageous? Before she could ask, Gu Xingyin asked first. Cici was dumbfounded. Gu Xingyin repeated the conversation between the two to Cici. After that, he asked the same question again. Cece thought for a moment and said uncertainly, "It should be a bit outrageous, right?" Chapter 1106. Gu Xingyin asked, "If I were to say something like that to you, how would you react? Would you cry and run out?" Cece thought for a moment. "I wouldn't cry, right? I'd probably ignore you." Gu Xingyin nodded. That was a normal reaction. If a normal girl was said to hate someone of the same sex, even if it was someone as gentle as Cece, she'd probably just ignore it with a cold face. If she had a fiery temper, she'd probably go up and fight with the other person. Running out with tears of sadness or something like that, this was obviously an unusual scene. The first class was the form teacher's class. Chang Ru was still comforting her hurt heart in some corner. The form teacher had always been very concerned about this kind of obedient student. She hurriedly asked her what was wrong. Then, as Gu Xingyin expected, Gu Xingyin was called to the teacher's office. In the office, Gu Xingyin saw Chang Ru with red eyes. Obviously, the form teacher had found this good student. The form teacher was comforting Chang Ru softly. When she saw Gu Xingyin, her expression immediately became serious. "Zhong Zhanghuan, students should love and help each other. Look at what you've done to Chang Ru to make her so sad." Gu Xingyin's expression was calm. "Teacher, I only told the class monitor that I don't like her." The form teacher obviously didn't expect her to be so honest. Gu Xingyin was even more honest. She looked at the form teacher and said sincerely, "Teacher, the class monitor and I really don't get along. I just don't like her. There's nothing I can do about it. I told the class monitor that I don't like her. She probably doesn't like me either. I'm a bad student. It's better not to affect a good student like the class monitor." Chang Ru looked at Gu Xingyin with red eyes. "Zhanghuan, I don't dislike you," Gu Xingyin interrupted her. "Class monitor, please call me Zhong Zhanghuan. I'm not that close to you." Chang Ru's tears that had just dried up fell again. The form teacher was speechless when she saw this. In the office, in front of her, Zhong Zhanghuan was not even willing to give her face. She really believed that Zhong Zhanghuan did not like Chang Ru. This kind of thing is not something that can be changed just by teaching her a lesson. The homeroom teacher looked at Chang Ru, who was still crying inside. In the end, Gu Xingyin was punished to be on duty for a week. The reason was that she did not treat her classmates well. Strictly speaking, there was no right or wrong in this matter. However, in the eyes of a teacher, the good student he liked and the bad student who always gave him a headache couldn't be treated equally. Gu Xingyin did not care about this. The effect she wanted was to let everyone, including her teacher, know that she didn't like Chang Ru. She glanced at the head teacher and Chang Ru in the office and said calmly, "Teacher, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Class is about to start." If Chang Ru had been a prideful girl, she would have hated her to death. However, to Gu Xingyin, she would rather someone like Chang Ru hate her than like her. When Gu Xingyin returned to the classroom, Cece looked at her nervously. "Zhanghuan, are you okay?" Gu Xingyin smiled and shook her head. "What could be wrong? I didn't do anything to her." Cece thought about it and agreed. At the same time, she felt that the class monitor was indeed a little too sensitive. During the third period, Chang Ru finally returned to the classroom. She did not look in Gu Xingyin's direction. It looked like she really hated her in her heart. After the fourth period, Gu Xingyin asked the system and went straight to the cafeteria. In fact, even without the system's reminder, she could find Lin Zhe at a glance. Some people had charisma that could be seen at a glance in a crowd. Chapter 1107. Moreover, in the dense crowd, the area around his seat was empty, which was extra conspicuous. No one could ignore the cold air coming out of his body and sit beside him. "Good afternoon, Lin Zhe." She walked over with a smile and sat opposite him without a care. Gu Xingyin swore that for a moment, she definitely heard the sound of gasps around her. Was it that scary? She found it funny. Could it be that Lin Zhe could eat people? Lin Zhe paused in the middle of eating. He raised his head and looked at Gu Xingyin coldly. Gu Xingyin didn't seem to notice his unhappy gaze and returned him a bright smile. Linza, how could there be such a girl who didn't know how to read the situation? He said coldly, I don't like people sitting beside me, especially when I'm eating. Gu Xingyin smiled and put a sweet and sour pork rib into her mouth. Oh. It was delicious. Linza's chopsticks clattered on the plate. He was very depressed, but he didn't know how to get angry at a girl. Gu Xingyin looked at him and asked strangely, why aren't you eating? The food will be cold later. It's not a good habit to waste food. Linza. I can't eat when there's someone beside me. He meant that she could leave now. Gu Xingyin completely ignored him. What a joke. If I really listened to you and left, how could I play in the future? She put down the chopsticks in her hand and looked at Linza seriously. She said earnestly, then you have to change this habit. This isn't your home. Other than your parents, no one has the obligation to accommodate you. Linza, did this girl really not understand what he was saying, or was she pretending to be stupid? He thought about her words and actions and confirmed that it was the latter. He silently picked up the plate in his hand and prepared to get up. How could he still be in the mood to eat? However, Gu Xingyin saw through his actions. She quickly finished the last bite and stopped Lin Zhe's actions. Hey, look at you. You didn't touch anything at all. Is there a need to be so serious over such a small matter? She looked at him dotingly and said, if you really feel that bad, I'll leave, okay? Don't skip meals. You'll be the one hurting yourself. I like you so much that my heart aches when I see you like that. After she finished speaking, she didn't wait for Lin Zhe to react and left with the tray. Lin Zhe, who didn't know whether to leave or stay, the onlookers. So this was possible. Their knowledge had really increased. In the end, Lin Zhe still sat down and finished the food on the plate one bite at a time. However, when everyone saw his expression, they couldn't help but shudder. It was as if he had just eaten something extremely disgusting. After teasing Lin Zhe, Gu Xingyin returned to the classroom in a good mood. Then, Changru stopped her at the door of the classroom. Gu Xingyin. This big sister, weren't you ignoring me? I've already made it so obvious, yet you still came looking for me. It's simply, Gu Xingyin couldn't find the right words to describe it. But this time, Gu Xingyin was really wrong. Changru only looked at her coldly. Zhong Zhanghuan, where's your homework from yesterday? Homework? Gu Xingyin was confused and at a loss. When she got home yesterday, she was so focused on talking to her dad that she didn't remember about homework. Chapter 1108. Changru knew what was going on just by looking at her face. She said coldly, there are school leaders coming over for an inspection today. Yesterday, the homeroom teacher specifically reminded you. Zhong Zhanghuan, wait for the homeroom teacher to call you into her office. With that, she turned around, leaving Gu Xingyin with a cold back view. Gu Xingyin returned to her seat. Her desk mate, Cici, leaned over and said, the school leaders won't check your homework. Zhanghuan, I'll tell you where the homework is. Finish it later and send it to the office. Gu Xingyin shook her head. Forget it. The homeroom teacher will probably know that I didn't do my homework soon. Sure enough, the homeroom teacher criticized Gu Xingyin in the next class. She told her in front of the whole class that if there was a next time, she would directly call her parents. Gu Xingyin gave Cici a helpless look. See, I knew it. As the class monitor, it was easy for Changru to catch her small mistakes. Similarly, if Changru was determined to teach her a lesson, it wouldn't be difficult for him either. Gu Xingyin sighed in his heart. This time, she probably really hates me because of her love. Gu Xingyin obediently did her homework and went to the office with a good attitude to admit her mistakes. She also said that she would definitely pay attention in class and finish her homework on time. Her good attitude made the homeroom teacher feel that it was abnormal. She looked at Gu Xingyin's completely different style of dressing these 2 days. Although it was still a little too much for a student to pursue beauty and maturity, it was much better than before. Could it be that this student had really turned over a new leaf? No, homeroom teacher and student union were enemies. Naturally, they hoped that their students would change for the better. Seeing her like this, the homeroom teacher didn't make things difficult for her. Instead, she gently comforted her that it was fine as long as she knew her mistakes and could change. Gu Xingyin walked out of the office with a smile on her face. But when she returned to the classroom, the expression on her face was back to the usual mocking half-smile. No one could tell what she said to the teacher in the office. Seeing her like this, Chang Ru sneered inwardly. Zhong Zhanghuan, I'm nice to you, but you don't care. Didn't you say that you wanted us to hate each other? I'll do as you wish, but I don't know if you can bear it. Cici was a little worried about her. Cici and Zhong Zhanghuan had been deskmates for 2 months. At first, she was quite afraid of this girl with a bad reputation, but later she realized that although Zhong Zhanghuan looked a little difficult to get along with, she was actually quite a nice person. Once, a boy in class bullied her, and her deskmate returned the favor on the spot. Zhanhuan often brought her chocolates. Moreover, the current Zhanhuan had become better than before. He no longer ignored people like before, but he was a little. She blushed and touched her face. She just liked to tease herself. What Cici didn't know was that Gu Xingyin found her bashful and cute. Her face was as red as an apple, so she liked to pinch her cheeks. Oh, it felt so good to the touch. When Cici saw Gu Xingyin return to her seat, she asked worriedly, Zhanhuan, did the homeroom teacher make things difficult for you? Gu Xingyin shook her head. Don't worry, don't worry. I'll be fine. Their seats were in the second row on the left side of the classroom, while Chang Ru's seat was in the third row in the middle. Chang Ru could see the two of them whispering intimately when he looked up. Her pen drew a line on the paper fiercely. Chapter 1109. Lin Zhe. Lin Zhe turned around and saw his good friend running towards him. His good friends Song Tao and Lin Zhe were childhood friends. Their families were very close and they were in the same high school, but they weren't in the same class. Lin Zhe, I heard. Song Tao looked at Lin Zhe mysteriously. That Zhong Zhanghuan from class 2 is chasing you? Lin Zhe frowned. Don't talk nonsense. How do you know? Song Tao clicked his tongue. How is it nonsense? Ask around. It spread throughout the school now. Who doesn't know that Zhong Zhanghuan from class 2 fell in love with the school hunk Lin Zhe at first sight? She goes to look for you every day. For you, she's even starting to study hard. Seriously. Song Tao suddenly said, actually, Zhong Zhanghuan is really pretty. I heard that she doesn't fight or skip class anymore. She's wholeheartedly focused on being a good student. She probably really likes you. Lin Zhe's expression didn't change. What does that have to do with me? Song Tao looked at his good friend's cold side profile and couldn't help but sigh. Sigh, I pity this girl. She's destined to fall out of love with you, this iceberg that won't melt. I don't know who can move your heart of stone. Lin Zhe didn't say anything. In class 2's classroom, Gu Xingyin sat seriously while Cici explained a math question to her. She solved the question correctly according to what Cici taught her. Zhanghuan, you're really smart. You can solve any question after just one explanation. Cici looked at Gu Xingyin in amazement. Gu Xingyin smiled and didn't say anything. How was she smart? She knew how to solve these questions, but in order not to arouse suspicion, she had no choice but to ask Cici one by one. Before Chang Ru walked out of the classroom, she couldn't help but glance at their seats. She watched as Zhong Zhanghuan changed her dressing style for that boy and started to listen to class seriously and study hard. All of this was because she heard that the boy liked girls like that. Chang Ru pressed his hand to his chest in a daze. She actually still liked Zhong Zhanghuan. If she really didn't like her, why would she ruin her outstanding image and make things difficult for her? If she really didn't like it? Just as Zhong Zhanghuan had said, the two of them had already gone their separate ways. But now, she liked him so much that she was willing to change herself for him. Would there really be a result for her liking him? She shook her head. If she were a man, she would have pursued Zhong Zhanghuan no matter what price she had to pay. However, Zhong Zhanghuan clearly had a normal personality. Was he really going to risk everything to bring her onto this path? For the first time, she felt a struggle. All right, thank you, Cece, for delaying your break time after school. By the time the two of them finished talking, the classroom was already empty. Cece smiled. That's nothing. You're studying hard now. The teacher even praised me. Speaking of this, she blushed a little. Everyone knew why Zhanghuan had become like this. But the teacher didn't know that. He thought that it was his good student who had influenced Zhanghuan and made her work hard. Speaking of which, Cece looked at Gu Xingyin with some heartache. She was doing this for Linza, but the other party was still as blunt as ever. Zhanghuan, how are you and Linza now? She couldn't help but ask. Chapter 11:10. Gu Xingyin's expression darkened, and Cece caught sight of it. She already knew the answer. But Gu Xingyin quickly perked up. That's it. It's not like I don't know how hard it is to woo the school beau. I'm already prepared for a long battle. Cece looked at her carefree expression and laughed. I wish you all the best. Gu Xingyin looked certain. Of course. After saying goodbye to Cece, Gu Xingyin returned home. Actually, all of this was just a facade she had created. She did like Linza, but she wouldn't lower herself to such a level for him. On one hand, it was to show Changru that she liked men and that it would never be possible with her. On the other hand, it was to show her father that Zhong Zhanghuan was rebellious, but Gu Xingyin didn't want her father to go through 3 years of exhaustion. She would try her best to be a good daughter that her father would be proud of. Also, her final goal was to let Zhong Zhanghuan walk the path she should have walked and become the hand of God in the field of design. If she wanted to do it, she would do it to the best of her ability. She would slowly change until the day she finally transformed. As for Linza, she was sincere in chasing him, but if he was always like this, Zhong Zhanghuan wouldn't be able to keep her eyes on him for the rest of her life. Huan, your Uncle Chen's family has a wedding banquet tomorrow. Are you going with Dad? Zhong Zhiping looked at Gu Xingyin expectantly. This gaze made Gu Xingyin's heart ache. In the original owner's memory, she hadn't attended any parties with her father in a long time. Outsiders only knew that Chairman Zhong had a daughter, but they had only heard of her name and never seen her in person. Every time, people would laugh and say that Chairman Zhong treasured his daughter too much and couldn't bear to let her out to meet people. Only Zhong Zhiping smiled bitterly. In the past, Huan was young, but now that she was older, she didn't want to attend these parties with him at all. How could he be reluctant? It was obvious that he couldn't get her to move at all. Of course. Gu Xingyin smiled brightly. I've never been Dad's date before. Zhong Zhiping also laughed. After Gu Xingyin went upstairs, he rubbed his eyes. She had almost shed tears in front of her daughter. But he was really happy. She had never been so happy before. His daughter was finally sensible. She began to study hard and think for him. It was as if she had become the little princess who loved to stick to him and let him kiss and hug her. The next day was the weekend. Gu Xingyin woke up early in the morning. Zhong Zhiping had already hired a stylist for her. Gu Xingyin was happy and relaxed. She sat there and let the stylist dress her. Miss Zhong is so beautiful. The stylist's eyes were full of admiration. In her line of work, not only did she have to be good at fighting, she also had to be good at talking. She had said this to countless socialites and young ladies, both sincere and hypocritical. But this sentence was undoubtedly sincere. When she first saw Gu Xingyin, she hesitated for a moment. This Miss Zhong's temperament was too unruly. With such an aura, wearing a standard gown might not be a suitable choice. However, she was about to attend a wedding banquet, not a fashion week. It wasn't suitable for her to be too unique. However, after the makeup was done and the gown was put on, she realized that the person in front of her had changed. Chapter 11:11. She was clearly a wild and unruly girl just a moment ago. Now, she was wearing a silver silk dress and sitting there quietly. Her entire body exuded a dignified and elegant aura. The makeup artist's eyes lit up when she saw this. Being able to change her aura according to the style of the dress at the right time was a quality that only professional models could have. Many professional supermodels could also have this ability after rigorous training, but Miss Zhong was obviously born with this ability. Moreover, she was nearly 1.7 meters tall at the age of 16. She could definitely develop in this direction. However, she looked at Gu Xingyin with some regret. A lady of this status would probably not be willing to enter that circle. She mentioned it vaguely. Gu Xingyin was a little surprised, but she still smiled and thanked her for her kindness. Thank you for your concern, but I have no intention of developing in that direction for the time being. Gu Xingyin, who was dressed up, went downstairs. Mr. Zhong was already waiting for her. When he saw his daughter slowly walking down the stairs, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Mr. Zhong only came back to his senses when he saw his daughter walking to his side. Gu Xingyin lifted her dress and twirled around. Am I very beautiful? Even Dad is fascinated by me. Mr. Zhong smiled and nodded. Yes, you are very beautiful. My Huan is the most beautiful. His daughter had already grown up, but she still looked so, like her mother. Gu Xingyin and Mr. Zhong got into the car and arrived at the Zhou family's wedding banquet. As expected, they saw Zhong Zhiping holding a girl's arm along the way. Looking at their expressions and Gu Xingyin's age, anyone with a discerning eye could immediately guess Gu Xingyin's identity. This is Miss Zhong, right? She's so beautiful. Such a beautiful daughter. If I were Chairman Zhong, I would definitely hide her at home and not let anyone see her. Zhong Zhiping's face was full of unconcealable joy. He had heard too many praises for him, so he didn't feel anything. However, he liked to hear praises for Huan. Even if it was obvious flattery, he could still reply with a few words with a smile. Everyone could see how much he valued his daughter. Naturally, they praised Gu Xingyin even more. Some people had speculated that Zhong Zhiping had a bad relationship with his only daughter. Now that they saw the appearance of the father and daughter, they dispelled the thoughts in their hearts. If they still didn't have a good relationship, then all the children in their family were probably adopted. Brother Zhong, is this Huan? You've grown so big. A middle-aged man with silver hair on his temples walked over. His complexion was very good. Gu Xingyin knew who he was. He was the chairman of the Zhou group and the father of the main character of today's wedding. The relationship between the Zhou family and the Zhong family wasn't bad. Zhong Zhanghuan had seen this Uncle Zhou when he was young, but he hadn't seen him in recent years. Uncle Zhou. Gu Xingyin greeted him obediently. Huan, Lin Zhe came here with the elders of his family. He was cold by nature and didn't like this kind of situation where people came and went. He also didn't like to pretend to be polite with people. However, in the past, his family would indulge him. Now that he was getting older, they couldn't let him be willful. His mother said to him, Zhe, you're the heir of the Lin family. You can't not appear in front of people for the rest of your life and let those people who can't be on the stage jump in front of outsiders. In their family, there were a lot of branches and illegitimate children. The family was in a mess. Lin Zhe's personality was also related to the environment he grew up in. Chapter 11:12. Lin Zhe knew that it wasn't easy for his mother. His father was a bastard. It was considered a business marriage with his mother. When they first got married, his father was still restrained. 2 years later, after giving birth to him as the heir, he began to reveal his true colors. He kept an actress outside and raised a second branch. He did everything that was absurd. His grandfather was about to give up on this son. If it weren't for the fact that he only had this one son, his father's position as the heir would probably have been stripped. When his grandfather saw that his son was useless, he began to nurture his grandson. Lin Zhe grew up with his grandfather. His father could tell that his grandfather's idea was to wait until Lin Zhe grew up before directly passing over his son and handing the Lin family over to his grandson. At first, his father saw the signs and felt that he would have to rely on his son to support him in the future. It was rare for him to show his fatherly love and ask about Lin Zhe's well-being. But how could the estrangement of more than 10 years be eliminated overnight? When Lin Zhe's father saw his son's cold and distant appearance, he roughly knew that in his son's heart, he probably didn't have a place as a father. He started to act like a demon again. He called back those illegitimate children outside and asked them to call old Master Lin grandpa. This was to let the illegitimate children inherit the family business. Fortunately, old Master Lin wasn't a fool. He chased them out on the spot and even said that even if he died, the Lin family's things wouldn't have a single cent of those things. Even so, Mother Lin and Lin Zhe were still disgusted. In the past, Mother Lin wasn't too strict with her son, but now she could see the urgency of the situation. This kind of business banquet gradually allowed him to participate in. Lin Zhe didn't want to let down his mother's painstaking efforts, so he could only follow her slowly. After exchanging pleasantries with the people around him, Lin Zhe heaved a sigh of relief. He looked around and saw that there was no one around. He placed the empty wine glass in his hand on the waiter's tray and slowly walked towards the balcony. It was quiet and empty here. With the soothing sound of a violin, Lin Zhe finally heaved a sigh of relief. He reached out to loosen his tie and let out a long sigh of relief. It was great without the unbearable smell of perfume and pretense. Anyway, he had already shown himself. His purpose for coming here today was almost achieved. Lin Zhe sat quietly on the balcony, admiring the moonlight. Occasionally, he would look back at the venue to see if there were any guests he needed to meet. A group of people who were about to enter the arena caught his attention. Lin Zhe knew the man in the suit. He was the head of the Zhong family and could be considered a big shot in the city's business circle. It was said that he only had one daughter, who was about the same age as him. She had always been well protected. Lin Zhe, the young lady holding his hand, looked somewhat familiar. The two of them had an intimate posture. Looking at Patriarch Zhong's expression, he seemed to dote on the girl. She was probably his legendary daughter. Wait a minute. Lin Zhe's eyes suddenly widened. He knew why this girl looked so familiar. For an entire month, Zhong Zhanghuan would come and pester her every day. She was actually the daughter of the Zhong family? Lin Zhe carefully looked at Gu Xingyin. Today, Zhong Zhanghuan was wearing a luxurious high-end dress. She stood quietly beside Father Zhong and greeted the people around her with a sweet smile. Her posture and etiquette were all in line with the temperament of a young lady from an aristocratic family. She was completely different from the arrogant Zhong Zhanghuan in school. Chapter 11-13. Lin Zhe looked at the noble and elegant Zhong Zhanghuan in the crowd and was a little confused. Was this quiet and sweet girl in front of him really the same person as the flamboyant and wild Zhong Zhanghuan he knew? At this moment, Gu Xingyin happened to look over. Meeting Lin Zhe's complicated gaze, she seemed surprised for a moment and then smiled at him. Then, Lin Zhe saw her tilt her head and say something to Father Zhong, who also glanced over. Then, Gu Xingyin walked towards him. Lin Zhe subconsciously tensed up, but then he reacted. What was he doing? She was just a classmate. Why was he nervous about her arrival? Gu Xingyin even asked the waiter for 2 glasses of wine on the way. She came to Lin Zhe's side and handed him a glass. I didn't expect to meet you here. Seeing that Lin Zhe didn't let go, Gu Xingyin smiled. We're classmates after all. Aren't you going to give me some face? Lin Zhe reached out and took the glass in her hand. Lin Zhe watched as she leaned against the railing and slowly drank a glass of champagne. Although her posture was casual, it didn't reduce her elegance. The two of them didn't speak, and a strange atmosphere flowed between the two of them. Lin Zhe was the first who couldn't stand this atmosphere. You. He hesitated. You're a little different from usual. Really? Gu Xingyin turned around and smiled at Lin Zhe. Then in your eyes, What kind of person am I usually? Lindsay was speechless. What should he say? Say that he didn't have a good impression of her? In the end, he just said lightly, "You're more unruly." Pfft. Gu Xingyin sneered. I hate people like you. If you don't like me, then don't like me. Just say it directly. What unruly? What you really want to say is, flamboyant? Maverick? You have to twist your words 3 times. Aren't you tired? It was also at this time that Lindsay saw a familiar wildness in her eyes. That's because I live in a different environment from you. Lindsay silently said in his heart. Looking at her, it was obvious that she was doted on at home. Mrs. Zhong had passed away for several years, but there were no rumors of Chairman Zhong having a new lover, nor were there any messy negative news. Actually, just look at Zhong Zhanghuan. How could such a character be raised in a family of mutual deception? He couldn't help but retort, "Aren't you dressed like this today?" Gu Xingyin understood what he meant. He meant that she was also pretending. She said bluntly, "Because this will make my dad happy. I want him to be happy." She then looked at Lindsay. "Aren't you the same? In such an occasion." She raised her head and nodded at the lively banquet hall. "You actually hate it, don't you?" Lindsay's body shook. Zhong Zhanghuan, she actually saw through his thoughts at a glance. Gu Xingyin said indifferently, "Don't think it's strange. After all, I like you so much. Naturally, I spent a lot of effort to find out your likes and dislikes." She was always like this. Whatever she liked, she directly put it on the table and didn't care about a girl's modesty at all. Lindsay didn't take her words to heart in the past, but now he suddenly felt a little strange. He couldn't help but look at Gu Xingyin. "What if I never like you? Will you still like me?" Chapter 11:14. Gu Xingyin raised her head and finished the wine in her glass in one gulp. She turned to look at Lindsay. "I like you. It's my business. Whether you like me or not is your business. Before I still like you, I won't give up because of your attitude. Before I still like you." Did this mean that she might not like him anymore in the future? Lindsay didn't know why, but when he thought of this possibility, his heart sank. "You mean that no matter what I do, you won't change your mind because of it?" Gu Xingyin glanced at him. "Of course. Lindsay, you don't have to be too narcissistic. I like you and chase you like this. A large part of the reason is that I enjoy the feeling of liking you and chasing you. But this kind of liking isn't love. Feelings that can't be reciprocated will be worn away one day. At that time, Lindsay." She looked at him and smiled. "You'll be free. No one will pester you anymore." It was a very novel theory. There were many girls who had confessed to Lindsay. Those girls would always say how much they liked him and were willing to do anything for him. Lindsay had heard too many such words, and he had never been moved by those sincere confessions. But no girl had ever said such words in front of him. "I like you. It's my own business." A thought even flashed through Lindsay's mind. Dating such a girl might be a very interesting thing. But this thought only flashed through his mind for a moment. After seeing his parents matter, he was very serious about relationships. If it wasn't someone he could spend a lifetime with, he wasn't willing to provoke. He couldn't have a relationship without responsibility just because of novelty or interest. The conversation between the two of them ended here. Lindsay was still sitting in his seat. Gu Xingyin put down her wine glass and walked towards the banquet hall where people were coming and going. Lindsay watched as she slid into the crowd like a clear spring and quickly blended in. He lowered his eyes and hid his expression. After the weekend, Lindsay was still the cold school hunk Lindsay. Zhong Zhanghuan had also turned back into the wild and flamboyant Zhong Zhanghuan. However, he still found something wrong in the school. During the meal, Zhong Zhanghuan would still sit beside Lindsay without caring about the cold air around him, but Lindsay didn't seem to reject her anymore. Sometimes, when Gu Xingyin came to class 3 to give Lindsay something, Lindsay would not let her take it back or throw it away. Instead, he would take out money and give it to her. Slowly, people began to guess whether Lindsay and Zhong Zhanghuan were dating. After all, Zhong Zhanghuan had already crossed Lindsay's bottom line. No one would believe that there was nothing fishy going on between the two of them. However, no one would believe that the two of them were dating. Because compared to Lindsay, who had accepted Gu Xingyin, he seemed to have ignored Gu Xingyin. Yes, ignore. It was as if he couldn't control what she did around him, but he wouldn't put any effort into it either. You can do whatever you want. I won't accept it, but I won't care. In fact, this description was not wrong. Lindsay was ignoring Gu Xingyin. After hearing her words, he knew that his reaction wouldn't have any effect on Gu Xingyin. Since that was the case, why should he make himself suffer every time? Then just pretend that she didn't exist. He would wait until the day she gave up. Lindsay never thought that when that day really came, he wouldn't be able to bear it. Chapter 11:15. Everyone in the school knew that Zhong Zhanghuan from grade 2 was crazily pursuing the school hunk, Lindsay. The teacher seemed to have received the news as well. However, Gu Xingyin's form teacher saw that this student had been serious about her studies recently and her grades had improved a lot. She had even entered the top 100 in the last monthly exam. She didn't know if there was the power of love in this, but seeing that nothing had happened, she didn't want to interfere rashly. What if the school's interference made this student return to how he used to be? The school banned puppy love and a series of other things. In the end, it was all to not delay the student's studies. If this matter became a motivation for the students to improve, as a teacher, she didn't have much of a right to stop it. In Class 2's classroom, Gu Xingyin sat obediently in her seat and practiced questions. A shadow suddenly fell over her head. She looked up. It was Chang Ru. This was a sports class, and it was a rare break. Everyone was relaxing on the field, but there was no one in the classroom. Class monitor, what's the matter? Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows. Chang Ru shook her head out of habit and nodded. I do have something to talk to you about. Gu Xingyin put down her pen and waited for Chang Ru to speak. Chang Ru sat in the seat in front of her and looked at Gu Xingyin. Do you really like Lindsay that much? Over the past few days, she had seen everything that Gu Xingyin had done and how she had changed. If she didn't like Gu Xingyin to the core, who would be able to do what she did? Gu Xingyin looked at Chang Ru with a faint smile. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with the class monitor, right? What was this woman up to now? Class monitor, are you going to tell Teacher Chen? Chang Ru's face paled. Am I such a person in your eyes? Gu Xingyin didn't say anything, but the expression on her face said everything. Chang Ru recalled what she had done when she was jealous and resentful of her, and her expression darkened. Indeed, she had done something similar in the past. She couldn't help but soften her tone. Don't worry, I won't do that. She looked at Gu Xingyin seriously and said, I just think that you're good the way you are, really. Zhong Zhanghuan, everyone is unique. You don't have to change yourself for others and become someone you don't even know. Upon hearing this, Gu Xingyin looked at Chang Ru in surprise. She was actually thinking for him. She looked at Chang Ru seriously and found that his expression was very serious. These words were indeed from the bottom of his heart. Had she finally thought it through? Gu Xingyin smiled. If this is your concern, then I'll accept it. By the way, I'll answer one of your questions. I do like Linza very much. I've never liked someone so much before, and I won't again in the future. Because other than him, she wouldn't like anyone else. Then, I want to make it clear that I didn't become like this for Linza. Just think of it as me suddenly coming to a realization. Chang Ru looked at her and obviously didn't believe her. She thought that Gu Xingyin was just stubborn and refused to admit it. In fact, most people would think so after hearing Gu Xingyin's words. But Gu Xingyin didn't care. She never had to explain what she was thinking to others. Chapter 11:16. In the end, Chang Ru sighed and left. She got the answer she wanted. It was time to let go. Gu Shengyin realized that Chang Ru's attitude towards her had changed again. She didn't treat her as well as before, nor did she secretly oppose her after becoming enemies with her. She began to treat Gu Shengyin as an ordinary classmate. Gu Shengyin heaved a sigh of relief. She didn't reject homosexuality. She hoped that Chang Ru wouldn't fall in love with someone like Zhong Zhanghuan in the future. Stubborn love often led to the final tragedy. Gu Shengyin didn't let go of her pursuit of Lin Zai, but she was no longer as ostentatious as before. She would sit at the side when Lin Zai was eating. She would watch all the basketball games, debates, and other events that Lin Zai participated in at school. Her academic results had been improving at a fast pace. By the time she was in her second year of high school, she was already in the top 30. Even the people in school knew about the relationship between the two of them. The way they looked at Gu Shengyin changed from strange to blessings. This girl was really pursuing the person she liked with all her heart. Even Lin Zai's friend said to Lin Zai, "It's not that I want to say this, but brother, you might not be able to find a girl who likes you so much in your life." Lin Zai didn't say anything. He didn't know how he felt about Gu Shengyin now. It didn't seem like he liked her. He didn't feel like he was blushing or his heart was racing when he looked at Gu Shengyin. But it wasn't completely true that he didn't like her. At least, Lin Zai knew in his heart that after such a long time, that person's position in his heart was still different. He had never been in a relationship, so he didn't know that the girl named Zhong Zhanghuan was using her own way to form a net of habit around him. When she was by his side, he couldn't sense anything wrong. He felt that his heart still needed to be tested by time. He thought that everything would be as he thought, waiting for him in the same place. The third year of high school arrived. Everything proceeded according to the normal steps, neither fast nor slow. At the end of the first semester of the third year of high school, more than a dozen students who lived in the city planned to have fun together. After all, after the next semester, they would not have such an opportunity again. Lin Zai didn't want to go at first, but he was dragged along by his brothers. Gu Shengyin went as well. They went hiking, karaoke, and soaked in hot springs. They played for a whole week. At night, they played card games and truth or dare in the hotel. Song Dao got the trump card. He rolled his eyes and said loudly, "The person who got the 7 of hearts, go kiss the person who got the 7 of spades." Everyone looked at the cards in their hands. Gu Shengyin looked down. 7 of spades. What a coincidence. Lin Zai pulled out the card in his hand with a dark face. It was a 7 of hearts. The two of them looked at each other, and the people around them started to jeer. The topic of these two people had been circulating for more than 2 years. Lin Zai's expression wasn't very good. Gu Shengyin didn't move either. Song Dao looked and said, "Lin Zai, you can't even afford to play such a game? It's not a big deal." Our beauty Zhanghuan didn't even say anything. Lin Zai lowered his head. Only he knew how fast his heart was beating at this moment. It wasn't that he was unwilling, but he was nervous. Seeing that Lin Zai didn't move, the atmosphere in the room became gloomy. Chapter 11:17. They were all students of the same grade, so of course, they all knew that Gu Shengyin liked Lin Zai. When they found out that the people who got these two cards were Gu Shengyin and Lin Zai, they secretly wanted to matchmake the two of them. Now, the situation was a little awkward. Lin Zai silently prepared himself mentally. Just as he was about to get up, he heard Gu Shengyin speak. She looked up with a smile and said, "It's just a game. Don't be so serious. I admit defeat. How about 3 glasses of wine as punishment?" Song Dao was secretly anxious, but when he heard this, he quickly said, "How can you let a girl drink as punishment? Lin Zai, you have the guts to play games but don't have the guts to accept punishment. Quick, punish yourself with 3 glasses of wine." Lin Zai's figure froze the moment Gu Shengyin spoke. He silently stiffened his body as he listened to her casually ask everyone to cancel the punishment. For some reason, unhappiness rose in his heart, but he didn't know what to say. He just remained silent as he picked up 3 glasses of wine and downed them. The others couldn't help but sigh when they saw his expression. It seemed that Lin Zhe really didn't like Zhong Zhanghuan. Even such a joke made him so angry. After such an incident, their enthusiasm had probably subsided quite a bit. After playing for less than half an hour, someone started to say that they were tired and wanted to rest early, so everyone dispersed. It was still early, and Gu Xingyin couldn't fall asleep, so she got up and went to the swimming pool outside the hotel to look at the night sky. She sat alone on the bench in boredom when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw Lin Zhe in a thick coat. Gu Xingyin looked at Lin Zhe walking over under the light and secretly sighed. Handsome men were indeed handsome no matter what. Lin Zhe couldn't sleep at first, so he got up and walked outside. He saw Gu Xingyin sitting alone by the swimming pool. The other party seemed to be sitting alone on the bench with a blank expression. He was so lonely that he didn't seem to fit in with the entire world. Gu Xingyin, young man, I'm just in a daze, don't overthink it. Lin Zhe walked uncontrollably towards Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin quietly watched him come over and raised her eyebrows. What's the matter? Lin Zhe paused for a moment. I think the night here is better. Gu Xingyin glanced back and did not comment on what he said. Lin Zhe was a little embarrassed, but he still sat down beside Gu Xingyin. The atmosphere between the two was a little awkward. Lin Zhe hesitated for a long time before saying, just now. Gu Xingyin turned around. Her clear eyes made his words stuck in his throat. I didn't do it on purpose. What Lin Zhe wanted to say was that he didn't mean to stay still. Just now, he thought about it. His previous behavior seemed to have made a girl lose face. However, Gu Xingyin did not get his central idea. She said faintly, you don't have to mind. This kind of thing is more of a prank. If it were me, I wouldn't be willing either. Her expression was very calm when she spoke, and it was impossible to tell that she was in a bad mood. Lin Zhe was still frowning, as if he wasn't satisfied with such an answer. Gu Xingyin looked at him and joked, what? Could it be that when you think about it later, you feel that you lost a chance to be intimate with a beauty like me? Or did you suddenly realize that you like me? Chapter 11:18. Lin Zhe was silent. He wasn't sure of his true thoughts, so he didn't know how to tell Gu Xingyin. His silence, however, made others think it meant something else, silent rejection. Gu Xingyin's face darkened. She seemed to have lost interest in sitting here and watching the night sky, and got up. She said to Lin Zhe, I'm going back to my room, you can enjoy it. Good night. Lin Zhe, good night. Gu Xingyin turned and walked back to her room without looking back. As she walked, she talked to the only system she could communicate with. System, I think there's no hope between Lin Zhe and me for the time being. The system thought so too. Gu Xingyin was a little confused. Logically speaking, with my experience in many worlds, although he won't remember me, I don't have any soul ties. He can't have no feelings for me. The system thought about it and expressed that it didn't know either. Gu Xingyin was still guessing. Could it be that Lin Zhe's values are so high that he doesn't even allow himself to have puppy love? System. It didn't really understand. One person and one system discussed this question for a long time, but they didn't get an answer. Until the end of the event, they all went back to their own homes. Then, the peaceful winter break of high school ended, and the last semester of high school arrived. Gu Xingyin decided to study hard and improve every day. This also meant that she didn't have so much time to find Lin Zhe every day and appear in every corner around him. On the first day, Lin Zhe didn't feel that anything was wrong. He even felt relieved when Gu Xingyin didn't appear around him. He felt that he still hadn't figured out how to face her. Maybe it was best to calm down and think about it. On the second day, on the third day, Gu Xingyin still didn't look for him. Lin Zhe started to feel a little uncomfortable. He once again returned to eating alone in the cafeteria. Logically speaking, it was a good thing for him that no one was invading his territory. However, he realized that his original habits had changed. If his previous habit was to eat quietly by himself, then in the past 2 years, he had become a habit of eating quietly with Zhong Zhanghuan. Now, the girl who suddenly appeared in his world without greeting him had suddenly disappeared again. Lin Zhe felt inexplicably uncomfortable in his heart. He went around to inquire about Gu Xingyin's recent situation. Knowing that she was now preparing for the college entrance examination with all her might, even eating nutritious meals that were specially prepared at home and sent to school every day, he heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it was not because of any other reason. Song Tao winked at his good friend. Say, do you have the legendary masochistic physique? When Zhan Huan threw himself at you wholeheartedly, you ignored him. Now that she has found something more important, you are starting to care about her. Sigh. That last sigh of his was full of meaning. This time, after a moment of silence, Lin Zhe gave his own answer in front of his childhood friend. It's not that I don't care, it's just that I don't know what I'm thinking. Song Tao's eyes lit up. Looks like there's hope. He hurriedly pulled Lin Zhe to the side and asked, Brother, what do you mean? Could it be that you actually have feelings for Zhan Huan in your heart? Chapter 11:19. As a close friend of Lin Zhe, Song Dao quite liked Zhong Zhanghuan. After all, they were brothers. Everyone hoped that he could find a good girlfriend, right? According to the situation of the Lin family, it was best if Lin Zhe's future wife was someone who could help him. Rather than marrying a woman who didn't know anything, Zhong Zhanghuan, who knew her background and had a strong family background, was undoubtedly the best choice. Putting that aside, Li Yundong's expression changed drastically. Song Dao still said the same thing, Lin Zhe, in this world, there might never be a girl like Zhong Zhanghuan who likes you as much as she does now. As a brother, he hoped that Lin Zhe could be happy. Of course, if Lin Zhe really didn't like Zhong Zhanghuan, he wouldn't force him. When it came to relationships, it was naturally about mutual consent. If Lin Zhe didn't like her, even if Zhong Zhanghuan loved him so much that she was willing to die for him, it would still be a passion. But looking at it now, Lin Zhe clearly didn't have no feelings for Zhong Zhanghuan. Song Dao was his good brother, so Lin Zhe didn't hide it from him. I think I might like her a little. But I'm not sure if this like can make me decide to continue walking with her. Song Dao looked at him with a gaze that was a little exasperated at his failure to live up to expectations. To be able to make Lin Zhe say such words, it proved that he definitely liked Zhong Zhanghuan in his heart. In this day and age, if you were a man, just go straight to her if you liked her. What were you still blabbering about? Song Dao really wanted to say this to Lin Zhe directly, but thinking about it, he couldn't. It was better to beat around the bush. Thus, he asked, how do you feel when you think of Zhong Zhanghuan? Lin Zhe thought for a moment and frowned. I don't think I feel anything. Song Dao held his forehead. He asked in a different way, you haven't seen each other since that gathering during winter break, right? Do you think of her? Do you think of her often? Lin Zhe nodded. He would think of Zhong Zhanghuan every day. Song Dao continued to ask, after school started, Zhong Zhanghuan didn't come to look for you. How do you feel? And now, the school is saying that Zhong Zhanghuan didn't get a response for more than 2 years and finally let go of this relationship. How do you feel when you hear these words? The temperature around Lin Zhe suddenly dropped. He replied, for the first question, I'm a little frustrated and depressed. For the second question, I'm very angry. That was the obvious answer. Song Dao sighed. It was already so obvious, yet he was still considering it. In the end, he used his trump card. Linza, think about it again. If one day, Zhong Zhanghuan doesn't like you and likes another man, what will you do? Lin Zhe imagined the scene that Song Dao described, and his expression immediately became very bad. Just the thought of it was unbearable. Song Tao knew the answer when he saw his expression. He sighed and patted Lin Zhe's shoulder. I won't say what the answer is. Linza, think about it carefully before deciding what to do. As a brother, I can only tell you one thing. A girl is willing to use 2 years of her youth to wait for you to turn back, but it doesn't mean that she will wait for you for another 2 years. The human heart will get tired. Lin Zai's body shook as he said in a low voice, I understand. Song Dao left, leaving the space for Lin Zai alone. Lin Zai sat alone for a long time and finally made a decision. Chapter 11:20. Class 3. It was the end of class at noon, but other than the students who went out to solve their physiological needs, no one else left their seats. As far as the eye could see, all of them were scribbling furiously. The entire classroom was very quiet, and only the sound of pens landing on test papers could be heard. In the third year of high school, even the most mischievous students began to take it seriously. This was a semester that concerned the future of their lives. They were already around 18 years old and had begun to understand that they had to be responsible for their own lives. Jean Huan, someone is looking for you. The crisp voice of a classmate near the window interrupted everyone's thoughts. Many people looked up curiously and saw the boy standing outside the window. The weather had begun to warm up. Lin Zai took off his thick coat and wore a light jacket. From beginning to end, he was full of the smell of youth. Gu Xingyin stopped writing and frowned as she looked at Lin Zai outside the window. She then looked at the gossipy eyes of many students in the class. She resigned to her fate and put down her pen and walked towards the classroom door. Lin Zai stood outside the classroom and looked at Gu Xingyin. They hadn't seen each other for more than a month, and this was the first time he looked at Gu Xingyin so seriously. The girl in front of him didn't have her hair tied up in a ponytail like other girls, nor did she have soft black hair falling behind her ears. Her hairstyle was always so exquisite, as if she would change it every 2 or 3 months. There were traces of light makeup on her face. It wasn't exaggerated. Her earrings today were a few small silver crosses. On her neck was a cross necklace of the same style as her neck, a gray t-shirt, 3/4 jeans, a long trench coat, and even a rather exaggerated ring on her left hand. With her appearance, she could be photographed casually on the streets. Why are you looking for me? Gu Xingyin asked. Lin Zai came back to his senses and asked, I want to ask, do you have time after school? Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and shook her head. I hired a tutor at home and made an appointment every day. Lin Zai didn't give up. What about the holidays? Gu Xingyin replied, I promised my father to visit my grandfather in another city this month, so I don't have time. She frowned and asked, do you have something to do? Lin Zai wanted to say yes. But looking at Gu Xingyin's pale face, she could tell that she had been very tired from her studies. If he confessed to her at this time, would it affect her studies? He thought for a moment and guessed that she would. He swallowed the words at the tip of his tongue and said, nothing important. Gu Xingyin looked at him suspiciously. She didn't see anything from his expressionless face, so she nodded and said, all right then. If there's nothing else, I'm going to the classroom. There are still a few test papers that I haven't finished. Lin Zai could only say, all right then, you go. I'll go back to class too. Then, he watched as Gu Xingyin turned around and entered the classroom. Just like the people around her, she buried herself in the thick stack of test papers. He didn't even raise his head to look at her. Seeing her like this, Lin Zai suddenly felt a little flustered. He recalled Song Dao's words. A person's heart will get tired. She's willing to spend 1 or 2 years waiting for you to come back, but she might not be willing to spend another 2 years. No way. He told himself. When the college entrance exam was over, he would confess to her. It wasn't too late. Chapter 11:21. After Lin Zai's figure disappeared outside Class 3's classroom, Cece, who had been engrossed in her homework, poked her head out. Jean Huan, what did Lin Zai say to you just now? Gu Xingyin didn't even raise her head. She answered the question while answering, he didn't say anything. Seeing that she didn't seem to care at all, Cece was a little suspicious. Jean Huan, do you not like Lin Zai anymore? Gu Xingyin stopped writing and looked at Cece strangely. Why do you ask? Cece replied, because looking at you now, you don't really care about Lin Zai anymore. You weren't like this in the past. Gu Xingyin smiled. That's because I wasn't in my 3rd year of high school before. Now, she had more important things to do. Cece continued, also, everyone is guessing if you don't like Lindsay anymore. You used to be so clingy to him, but now you're not like before at all. Gu Xingyin smiled. That's not true. But... Cece asked curiously, but what? Gu Xingyin shook her head. Nothing. Hurry up and do your homework. Just then, the bell rang for class. Cece swallowed the questions she was about to ask and began to do her homework seriously. To Gu Xingyin's surprise, not only did Cece ask, but even Changru specially came to look for her. Ever since the two of them chatted, Changru seemed to have untied the knot in his heart. In the past year or so, just as Gu Xingyin said, the two of them were in the same class. They saw each other frequently, but they were always familiar strangers. Class rep? Gu Xingyin was a little strange. The two of them no longer fought against each other and got along quite harmoniously. Did you have a conflict with Lindsay? Changru asked hesitantly. Gu Xingyin shook her head. Why are you all asking this question? I didn't. Changru looked at Gu Xingyin. Actually, it's not that we're curious, but your reaction is too strange. Gu Xingyin smiled, because I no longer put all my focus on him. Changru did not say anything. That was indeed what she was thinking. Gu Xingyin laughed. Didn't you tell me before? Let me be myself, don't change because of others. Why is it that now that I've found a direction to work towards, all of you are not used to it? Changru also laughed. Maybe it's because you were too crazy in the past. It made people feel that Linza was the only thing in Zhong Zhanghuan's life. Gu Xingyin shook her head. No one is the only one in a person's life. For example, right now, the only thing more important than Linza in my life is the college entrance exam. The conversation between the two ended here. The college entrance examination was getting closer and closer. Gu Xingyin never went to Linza again. No one had the time to care about the gossip between the two of them anymore. Occasionally, Gu Xingyin would hear some news about a freshman confessing to Lindsay, but Lindsay rejected her. Lindsay participated in the city's high school boys basketball competition and won the Best Player award. The closer it was to the college entrance exam, the busier she became. Not only did she have to prepare for the college entrance exam, but she also had to prepare for her dream of being a designer. There was only a month left until the college entrance exam. In the original plot, the luxury brand representative who had specially come to Z for the fashion week finally arrived. Gu Xingyin sent the works she had prepared for an entire month to the address. At this moment, there was still a month until the college entrance exam. As the time approached, the atmosphere in the class became more and more tense.